cek. Halo teman-teman semuanya yang udah nonton via YouTube ya. Selamat siang. Tenang.
Ya, kami ucapkan selamat datang di NextDev Academy Inauguration Day. Acara kami mulai sesaat lagi.
Lihat deh, ada jaringan wifi baru, bagus banget. Ya udah aku konekin aja.
Hati-hati tuh, berarti kamu bukan pakai wifi yang biasanya ada di sini dong.
Ya kan aku udah bilang ada wifi baru. Nggak ngerti?
Aku kan cuma ngasih tahu kamu. Nanti data-data kamu bisa dicuri sama orang itu.
Kamu upload Instagram. Loh, Kok nggak bisa login?
Kuota kamu habis kali itu mah.
Kan aku pakai wifi.
Jangan-jangan akun kamu tuh dihacker sama orang.
Gimana ini? Jadi gimana?
Mana salah sendiri lah. Udah dikasih tahu nggak dengerin. Kemarin juga gara-gara VPN, aku lagi yang disalahin.
Jadi kamu nyalahin aku?
Oh iya dong.
Emang ya, cowok tuh nggak pernah mau disalahin.
Mau kemana? Bayar dulu ini.
Bodoh amat, bayar sendiri. Bye.
Dut, badut. Badut.
Jelas-jelas kucing. Kenapa lo manggil kayak burung sih?
Bosan akut nih gue.
Bosan. Ini obatnya.
Tonton film-film terbaru di aplikasi Disney Plus Hotstar. Cuma 20.000 udah termasuk langganan plus tambahan kuota. Aktifkan di My Telkomsel. Yuk Bun, maraton film seri. Mumpung anak lagi mimpi. Semua di aplikasi Disney Plus Hotstar. Cuma 20.000 udah termasuk langganan plus tambahan kuota. Aktifkan di My Telkomsel.
Iya, kami ucapkan selamat siang dan semangat pagi.
Pagi, luar biasa banget. Gimana kabarnya hari ini?
Saya alhamdulillah baik. Ini apa kabar?
Pastinya dong, lihat nih udah cerah sekali
Cerah
ya.
banget kayak masa depannya teman-teman di NextDev Academy. Amin.
Betul sekali, amin. So anyway, kita pengen ucapin selamat siang dan selamat datang
Dalam
di
acara
NextDev Academy Inauguration Day.
Boleh kita beri tepuk tangan secara virtual terlebih dahulu para teman-teman yang sudah hadir pada acara hari ini. Perkenalkan, ada rekan saya yang cantik.
Bisa aja deh, aku suka deh ya. Perkenalkan, aku Yeni Wiana
Dan
bersama
saya,
dengan
Randy Wicaksana. Senang sekali hari ini akan memandu acara Inauguration Day.
Yes.
Kurang lebih berapa lama nih kita akan mandu?
ada 30 jam ke depan.
Canda ya, canda kerumuri bagaimana? dalam 3 jam ke depan.
Yes, betul sekali. Dan jujur ini kita luar biasa senang sekali ya Randy ya pada kesempatan kali ini bisa menemani teman-teman semuanya meskipun harus secara virtual
Gak
tentunya.
apa-apa, iya dan hari ini tentunya kita mau disclaimer terlebih dahulu.
Oh iya betul
Randy
sekali.
dan ini tidak pakai masker izin dilepas karena kita sudah terlebih dahulu menerapkan protokol 5M dan sudah dites swab antigen dengan hasil alhamdulillah
Negatif. Ya harus negatif dong ya. So anyway kita juga pengen ingetin himbau teman-teman semuanya dimanapun Anda berada ya. Untuk tetap mengindahkan yang namanya protokol kesehatan kita yaitu 5M. Nah kalau dulu mungkin kita kenalnya 3M Randy ya.
Kalau 5M apalagi?
Tapi sekarang 5M. Yang pertama memakai masker itu udah wajib hukumnya ya. Terus juga mencuci tangan, menjaga jarak, membatasi mobilitas serta menghindari kerumunan.
Dan yang gak kalah penting?
Adalah 1M ini teman-teman yang paling penting ya, yaitu menjalankannya. Karena kalau nggak dijalanin sama dengan bohong
Sama
ya.
aja bohong, betul banget. Dan tentunya semuanya kita lakukan saat penyelenggaraan acara Inauguration Day yang spesial pada hari ini. Dan tentunya kita mau sapa juga teman-teman yang hari ini hadir. Itu ada yang melalui sambungan Zoom, ada para finalis NextDev Academy. Kita boleh terlebih dulu minta kalian nyalakan kameranya, boleh di open camnya semuanya, kita bisa
Yes.
lihat wajahnya tampan dan juga cantik dan senyum manis.
Luar biasa nih, waduh ada yang cakep-cakep banget ya. Meskipun di rumah aja tapi tetap loh cakep-cakep dan cantik
Wajib.
luar biasa sekali ya. So
Kita
anyway.
sapa juga yang terhubung melalui sambungan YouTube.
YouTube, betul sekali.
Hai.
Teman-teman di YouTube boleh dong komen di kolom komentar ya. Mungkin boleh,
Ramaikan.
mungkin boleh komen aku dari kota Bandung, dari Pekanbaru, dari Jakarta atau dari mana. Boleh komen aja di kolom komentar ya.
Iya, dan mungkin banyak teman-teman yang bergabung pada hari ini ikut untuk melihat webinarnya eksklusif,
Betul
tapi
sekali.
tidak begitu paham. Sementara NextDev ini acara apa gitu ya?
Yes, betul sekali. Jadi buat teman-teman beserta dengan Randy ya, jadi NextDev ini merupakan program yang khusus ya, yang khusus dipersembahkan oleh Telkomsel, di mana tujuannya untuk meningkatkan ekosistem digital di Indonesia.
Betul, jadi sudah dari tahun 2015 ya nih.
Berarti kalau aku
Berarti
hitung kurang
sudah
lebih udah ada 6 tahun
6
lamanya ya.
Betul, jadi sudah cukup lama ya, udah masuk sekolah TK kalau anak kecil ini.
Udah SD deh kayaknya Bapak.
Udah mau SD, betul
Udah
banget.
mau SD nih.
Dan tujuan dari The Next Dev ini yaitu untuk memfasilitasi pertumbuhan startup yang memiliki social impact di garis bawahi. Salah satunya melalui program The Next Dev Academy ini ya.
Betul banget Randy. Nah menjawab nih sekaligus karena tadi sudah disampaikan tentang NextDev Academy ya. Jadi buat teman-teman yang belum nggak, aduh Mbak Yan NextDev itu tadi udah dijelasin. Tapi kalau NextDev Academy ini apa sih sebenarnya? Jadi NextDev Academy ini merupakan sebuah early stage startup digital ya yang memiliki social impact di mana para pesertanya ini merupakan para top finalist dari talent scouting kemarin ya.
Ya, jadi ada 16 peserta, ada 16 finalis yang sudah 3 bulan ini melalui berbagai program mulai dari online bootcamp,
Yes.
webinar dan juga one-on-one mentoring.
Betul sekali dan kita pengen ingetin buat teman-teman semuanya ya jangan lupa untuk yang di YouTube ya tentunya ya untuk follow dan juga subscribe YouTube channel kami ya. Tapi Randy mungkin sebelum kita mulai kita akan berikan dulu kali ya ini
Apa nih?
tips-tipsnya ya supaya rangkaian acara kita bisa berjalan dengan lebih nyaman.
Betul, kita saksikan di layar kaca Anda
Yes.
yang perlu atau sebaiknya Anda ikuti biar lebih nyaman mengikuti sesi pada hari ini. Antara lain boleh kita tayangkan teman-teman?
Yes, yang pertama pastikan koneksi internet kamu stabil dan juga ruangannya sudah kondusif teman-teman ya. Kemudian yang kedua, ini paling penting juga menurut aku Randy ya,
Apa tuh?
yaitu mencatat poin-poin penting yang disampaikan oleh fasilitator kita nanti.
Biar pinter ini ya, dan kemudian juga kita minta bantuan teman-teman untuk aktifkan kameranya bagi nanti yang ikut bertanya dan juga menyalakan mikrofonnya. Dan gunakan juga fitur raise hands atau simply masukkan pertanyaan kalian di kolom chat ketika hendak bertanya nanti. Ini berlaku bagi yang berpartisipasi melalui sambungan Zoom. Kalau yang nanyanya dari YouTube gimana caranya?
Yang dari YouTube gampang banget kok, nanti kamu bisa langsung aja masuk melalui web browser kamu ya di slide.do dengan kode event TNDA strip inauguration. Atau, nah ini udah ada QR code ya, bisa langsung di scan aja teman-teman karena kita punya hadiah nih untuk 3 penanya terbaik.
Jadi persiapkan pertanyaan berkualitas mungkin.
Betul sekali dan kita juga pengen ajak ya teman-teman semuanya pastilah ya namanya anak zaman sekarang
Zaman
gitu ya.
now.
Pasti punya namanya social media Iya,
Wajib
untuk itu
tuh
kita
follow.
ajak kalian semuanya untuk follow sosial media kami ada di Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, dan pastinya YouTube channel.
Iya, dan jangan lupa unggah juga momen spesial Anda, keseruan Anda mengikuti sesi pada hari ini di Instagram dengan tag akun Instagram @thenextdev. Dan nanti unggahan yang beruntung akan juga berkesempatan mendapatkan hadiah voucher link aja sebesar Rp100.000.
Yes, betul sekali. Dan mungkin nih ya, kita bisa jelaskan secara gambaran besar kali Randy
Iya,
ya.
singkat aja.
Hari ini bakal ada apa aja sih sebenarnya kegiatannya Ren?
Yang menjadi highlightnya, jadi intinya ada dua. Pertama, webinar eksklusif yang kita jamin banget fasilitatornya ini seorang yang eksklusif banget kita datangkan.
Wow, aku
Dan yang
suka
kedua
banget nih.
adalah
Yaitu adalah The Next Dev Evangelist, di mana hari ini kita akan mencari tahu, ya waduh mencari tahu nggak tuh ya?
diumumkan.
Yes, betul sekali. Jadi buat teman-teman semuanya makanya please pastikan kalian standby ya, ikutin acara kita, ikutin keseruan hari ini sampai akhir acara nanti.
Iya.
And yes, mungkin ini karena udah pada nggak sabar ya.
kita
Sebelum
langsung
kita
aja nih.
mulai rangkaian acara kita, Randy dan teman-teman ya, kita akan persilahkan terlebih dahulu ini sosok yang begitu penting lah ya buat kita ya. Silakan.
Kita akan mengundang Mas Hadi Sucipto atau Mas Hadi, biasa diakrab begitu, yang merupakan CSR Education and Public Community Development Manager Telkomsel dan juga merupakan The
The
Next
Next
Dev
Dev Project Leader, luar biasa banget ya. Langsung aja kalau gitu kita akan sapa, ini dia Mas Hadi Sucipto.
Kita sapa Mas Hadi, selamat pagi.
Semangat pagi.
Semangat pagi, pagi, Yendi
Luar
Randy.
biasa. Udah makan siang Mas Hadi?
Waduh, udahlah. Kalian enak banget ya bisa berdua-duaan di situ ya.
Tenang Mas Hadi, meskipun berdua-dua kami tetap protokol kesehatan
Wajib
kok.
nomor satu.
Wajib ya, wajib. Oke deh Mas Hadi, ini teman-teman kita yang udah join via Zoom dan juga YouTube pasti udah pada nggak sabar banget nih Mas. Langsung aja kita persilakan Mas.
Ya, terima kasih Yeni Randy. Semangat pagi semuanya pada teman-teman founders dari NextDev. Alhamdulillah kita dapat terhubung kembali hari ini walaupun secara virtual di acara inaugurasi The NextDev Academy. Selamat datang nih kepada seluruh peserta. Hari ini juga hadir dari Telkomsel ada Pak P. Andri P. Santoso selaku GM CSR, ada Teh Dian Ono selaku ketua mentor kalau kita bilang Teh Dian ini mah. Selamat datang juga nih kepada para startup founder peserta The NextDev Academy 2020 dan selamat bergabung juga untuk para penonton yang menyaksikan langsung di YouTube The NextDev Hub. Terima kasih sudah hadir di acara ini dan semoga kita semua terus diberikan kesehatan. Rekan-rekan, seperti yang kita ketahui bahwa Telkomsel terus berkontribusi bagi Indonesia dengan cara mendorong perkembangan para talenta digital muda. Salah satunya melalui program The NextDev Academy yang merupakan program inkubasi untuk early stage startup dengan social impact. Selama lebih kurang 3 bulan terakhir ini, program The NextDev Academy telah dijalankan. Para peserta telah melewati serangkaian program yang diberikan mulai dari kick-off webinar, online bootcamp, webinar series, dan sesi mentoring yang saya yakin pastinya sangat bermanfaat untuk rekan-rekan startup. Semoga dengan mengikuti rangkaian program akademi ini dapat menjadikan pertumbuhan bisnis dan impact startup rekan-rekan semakin pesat. Dan saya ucapkan terima kasih sebanyak-banyaknya untuk rekan-rekan founders yang sudah berperan aktif selama diadakannya program akademi ini. Nah, siang hari ini kita akan mengadakan inaugurasi yang menjadi acara puncak dari program The NextDev Academy 2020. Acara ini bukan hanya sebagai upacara berakhirnya program, tapi sebagai penanda bagi para startup peserta akademi untuk terus melanjutkan perjalanan bisnisnya dan memperluas dampak sosialnya kepada masyarakat. Hari ini kita kedatangan tamu spesial nih untuk Anda semuanya nih, untuk teman-teman startup. Ada Mr. Rowan Yoman yang merupakan creator dari Social Lean Canvas dan beliau merupakan senior consultant The Akina Foundation di New Zealand. Beliau juga akan memandu sesi webinar kita hari ini dengan topik Getting to Scale with Money and Impact. Tidak lupa nih yang menjadi momen penting hari ini, yaitu kita akan mengumumkan The Next Dev Evangelist. Siap-siap, siapa yang bakal menjadi startup yang dipilih berdasarkan pertumbuhan bisnis dan impact-nya serta performance selama mengikuti program The NextDev Academy. Nah, akan ada reward berupa grants untuk startup yang terpilih sebagai evangelist. Nah, rekan-rekan, saya ucapkan selamat mengikuti acara hari ini. Semoga sesi webinar nanti bisa memberikan banyak ilmu baru. Dan untuk para startup peserta NextDev, selamat bersiap menjadi the NextDev evangelist. Semangat pagi!
Pagi. Wow, terima kasih banget Mas Adi, luar biasa nih ya. Saya makin deg-degan ya. Karena hari ini kita akan mencari tahu nih siapa yang bakal jadi the NextDev Evangelist. Oke.
Tapi nanti di akhir acara dan seperti tadi yang Mas Adi telah paparkan bahwa ada eksklusif webinar dari seorang pembicara atau fasilitator yang istimewa. Thank you very much Mas Adi.
Once again terima kasih banyak ya Mas Adi ya. Semangat pagi.
Pagi.
Luar biasa banget.
Ladies and gentlemen, our facilitator, as Mas Adi has mentioned before, is the creator of Social Link Canvas.
Wow.
We invite him all the way from the Auckland, New Zealand, the land of Kiwi. Allow me to introduce him briefly. He is a startup entrepreneur, investor, and also advisor, and has worked with numerous startup ventures in New Zealand and USA.
Wow, but before that Randy, mungkin aku bakal bantu remind lagi ya buat teman-teman semuanya yang ingin bertanya. Karena nanti setelah sesi pemaparan dari beliau, kita akan buka sesi untuk diskusi bareng Randy ya. Jadi buat teman-teman semuanya yang ingin bertanya, baik itu melalui Zoom maupun YouTube, kami persilahkan. Kalau teman-teman dari Zoom, kalian bisa langsung aja ketik di kolom komentar ya. Dan buat teman-teman yang dari YouTube, seperti yang udah aku sampaikan tadi, bisa pakai slide, bisa juga langsung scan QR code-nya. Oke, kayaknya udah pada nggak sabar.
Any further ado, allow me to introduce you. This is Rowan Yeoman.
So, hi Rowan.
A very good evening,
Halo,
Rowan.
selamat pagi.
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 Yes.
May I know what time is it now in New Zealand, Rowan?
It is 6:45 in the evening. So
In the
starting to
evening.
wind down.
Oke,
It's getting
kurang
dark.
lebih udah jam 7 malam teman-teman. Tapi luar biasa hari ini Rowan bakal share banyak banget dengan kita ya tentunya ya.
Yep. We understand it's already late evening and we thank you for being here with us. We got
Yes.
lots of time differences. So without any further ado, we will let you have the screen. The screen is all yours now, Rowan.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Where to start? It's great to see all of you that I can see. I'm sad to not be in Jakarta. It would be nice to come and visit Jakarta and see all of the lovely people and eat all the beautiful food. But I'll just have to imagine it this time. Until next time, maybe when COVID is finished. Where should we start? I'll start by sharing my screen, and then I won't have to look at myself, so that will be nice. That's not it. I think I have screen sharing privileges. Here we go. Oh, host, can you please allow me to share my screen? There we go. Thank you very much. All right. Can I get a thumbs up if people can see that?
Baik, buat teman-teman bisa
Excellent.
kelihatan ya. Semuanya boleh
We got
kasih kita
one
thumbs
thumbs
up.
up.
Yes.
One's enough. Awesome. So today I want to talk to you about getting to scale with impact and money. And so this is about understanding the fundamentals of evolving a business model so that it can succeed. So I'll start just, I don't need to introduce myself. The wonderful hosts have introduced me. So I don't need to introduce myself, but I'm in New Zealand, a long way away, small island in the middle of the ocean. The thing I'd really like to start with though is understanding who is in the room today. So who is here from the NextDev Academy program? Do you think if you can, you could just jump onto the chat and just tell me very quickly What's the name of your enterprise? Maybe a one-line description of your enterprise, what it does, what it is for, the purpose. And then what stage are you at? Are you pre-market, so haven't got a product in market yet? Are you early in the market, trying out products, or are you established in the market? Do you think you could jump in and just give me an idea of who is there? Don't all do it at once. Someone might have to translate if it's in Bahasa Indonesian. So we've got key data.
Oke, jadi mungkin buat teman-teman yang masih belum paham gitu ya. Jadi di sini Rowan ngajakin kita untuk biar lebih kenal lebih deket ya. Buat kita semuanya yang pertama di dalam kolom komentar untuk menuliskan nama startupnya. Kemudian dilanjutkan dengan penjelasan singkat aja mungkin dalam satu kalimat, jangan satu paragraf ya. Pendek aja, singkat mengenai bisnisnya kamu. Dan yang ketiga adalah
dimasukkan kamu sudah di level mana sekarang, apakah pre-market, early market, atau sudah di tahap established.
Betul sekali.
Yeah, we have helped Erwan to translate this to the participants. Hopefully we're getting more comments now.
Alright.
Jadi
buat teman-teman,
platform for Muslim families.
Ya.
No code platform to create Android apps. When you're in market established. Very good.
Oke, jadi buat teman-teman yuk yang belum tulis silahkan. Masih akan kita tunggu ya, masih akan Rowan tunggu. Karena seperti yang udah kita bilang tadi ya, ini merupakan diskusi. Jadi kita buka kesempatan agar nanti Rowan juga bisa kenal lebih dekat dengan startupnya teman-teman.
Travel Buddy, travel platform that connects travelers with Indonesian diaspora all over the world. Very cool.
Oke. Nah untuk teman-teman dari YouTube gimana nih Randy?
Boleh juga kan ada kolom komen di YouTube.
Oh iya betul. Jadi buat teman-teman yang dari YouTube juga bisa ikutan ya. Oke, bisa ikutan juga dengan nulisin mungkin startupnya kamu ya.
Kalau memang sudah punya startupnya atau sekedar belajar mungkin ya. So Rowan, our participants are not only in the Zoom but also for the public. They're joining in on YouTube though.
YouTube channel, yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's great. That's given me a bit of an idea of the kind of ventures that are out there and some really interesting ones, and a variety in early market and established, and a variety of different ventures. So that's really nice to see. Okay, I'll push on. So what we're going to talk about today, where are we? Oh, I went too far. Here we go. Okay, so I thought very, very hard about what to talk about with you today. So over the years, I've worked with hundreds of startups at different stages of the journey and with very different business models. And when I thought about where you're coming to at the end of this program, I wanted to lay out something that will be useful to help you not just now, but in the years to come. So a way of thinking about business models that will help you evolve your business models over time into something that can be successful. Recently I watched an old interview with Steve Jobs, who was the founder of Apple. And he was talking about how you create a product. And he said, what you have to do is hold 5,000 things in your head every single day. And every day you take those 5,000 things and you think, well, what has to change to fit with this? And so it's all about physics, what can glass do, what can electronics do, and then it's all about market and what do the public want and who will pay for things. And you take all of these things and every day you change them and change them and change them until you get your product that can work. And when I thought about that, I thought about what are to get a business model to work, what are the key things that you have to get right that usually you don't get taught about? Normally we get taught, you find a customer, you sell a product, and you build a business. But what are the very important things we don't normally talk about? And what I realized was there are two concepts that are really important that we don't talk about, that are the deep code that is inside a business model. And if you can understand these and then see them and understand how to work with them, you can always move your business model towards something that can succeed. And these concepts are the concept of leverage and the concept of scale or economies of scale. And so today we're going to talk about those. And so we're going to start with some context setting. We're going to talk about the concept of leverage. We're going to talk about the concept of scale. And then I'm going to talk you through some different examples of companies and organizations that use these and how they use them. And then we'll look at a practical way that you can evolve your business models using these ideas of leverage and scale to make them better. Hopefully that sounds okay and it sounds interesting. I have an hour to talk, and then we're going to have 30 minutes of questions. And so it's a lot. I could talk for maybe 1 week on these topics. So what I have done is I've put a lot of information into the presentation. So if you don't understand something, if I go too fast or it doesn't make sense, we will send you a copy of the presentation and you'll be able to go back through the presentation and read some more of the detail. So hopefully you'll be able to use it and apply it after this presentation. Sound good? Okay, let's get started then. So impact-driven businesses. So the first bit of context I think it is important to talk about is how we understand impact-driven businesses and how we understand that in a way that can make it useful to make them succeed in the world. And there is a lot of talk about social enterprise and impact-driven business and impact enterprise and lots of different words for it. So I want to start by just talking through how I think about impact-driven business, and hopefully that will be useful for you in understanding what you're doing and how you're trying to make money but have impact at the same time and balance those things. So the first concept I want to talk about is this idea of scaling impact. And if you can see down the bottom there is a very simple equation, and it says impact model plus a scaling model equals impact. And this idea is the impact model is the formula by which what you're going to do is going to change the world. So maybe you're educating children, or you're providing counseling to people with mental health problems, or you're recycling plastics so that they don't go into the ocean. So your impact model says if we do these things, something good will happen. But the impact model itself is like a recipe for a dish. So a recipe for nasi goreng. The recipe, you can't eat the recipe. It is just the recipe. It's just written on paper. What you need to make the impact model have effect in the world is a scaling model, a way to make it manifest in the world. And so if you take an impact model and you add a scaling model, you get impact. And we'll come back to this idea of how scale works later on. But so that basic model, if we looked at it up here, is you've got this impact model, theory of change, you've got a scaling model, and then you've got impact. And there are maybe 4 main ways that this can work. You can use a scaling model that is government funding and payment for outcomes. So you get government to pay you to do things. It might be philanthropy. And so what philanthropy is somebody else has taken money that they have made through business and they've applied it so that you can make your impact model work. You could take an existing business model. So if you're a successful business and you have profit, you can take that profit and you can use it. And that's what Telkomsel is doing by funding this program, is they're taking an existing business model, which is the telco business model. They're taking profits from that and they're using it to pay for good things. But then the 4th one, which is the one we're going to talk about today, it's the really hard one, because it's the one where you develop a new business model. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's the one that is hard. And so if you choose to use a business model as your scaling model, it means that you need to use modern startup thinking to guide you. You need to have really deep understanding of how business models work and how to design and test business models in order to make it succeed. Okay, hopefully that's clear. So that's a little bit of context setting based on your enterprises, that you're trying to use a business model to deliver your impact model, and that is about how you deliver scale through your business model. Okay. So the first concept that we're going to talk about today is the concept of leverage. So leverage is, if you see the picture over on the side of a lever, hopefully everyone knows what a lever is. It's the ability to lift something very heavy with only a small amount of force. So because of the design of your lever, you can do a lot of work with a small amount of effort. And so for a business model, leverage is the multiplier effects. So it's the thing inside your business model that allows a lot to be produced with a small amount of effort. And if you don't have leverage, you don't have a business. The leverage is crucial to all business, and without it, there is no business. You've got to have a multiplier effect, otherwise there's no ability to create a surplus of value, which turns into profit, which turns into impact, and all of that. So we're going to talk about the fundamental dynamics that sits behind all business, which is the concept of leverage. And so there are kind of 3 main things to consider. And like I say, you don't have to understand all of this. There's a lot here, but this is for you to follow up on if you want to read more about this afterwards. But the 3 things I want to talk about are business model leverage, strategic leverage, and compounding leverage. And these are 3 really important concepts. So business model leverage, which is the main one we want to talk about today, is how these multiplier effects are operating inside your business model and how they're going to get you to success. And as I said before, no leverage, no business. It's as simple as that. You might have a charity. You have no leverage, you can have a charity. Someone gives you money, you pay for outcomes. That's fine, but you don't have leverage. There's no ability to make a surplus and reinvest and all of that kind of stuff because there's no leverage. You take $1,000 and you buy $1,000 worth of outcomes. You don't take $1,000 and buy $1 million worth of outcomes because there's no lever. And business model leverage always works as a function of economies of scale. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, which is how we understand how you take that idea of leverage and then you grow it into something that can support the whole business. The other part of business model leverage is what we call incremental leverage, and that's the smaller ways you apply leverage across your whole business model. So it's not the main leverage that you use, but it's these smaller ways that leverage get used, and we'll talk about that later on. But very quickly, I'll walk you through the different kinds of leverage. So the first one is there's what we call perceptual leverage, which is how do you shift the way people think about things in a way that can create value for the business model. And so that could be branding or something like that, or it might be more sophisticated. It might be behavioral economics and context design to change how people think about something, because changing the way they think about something might double the value of it. You might, you can turn a cheap bottle of wine into a nicer bottle of wine by putting it in a heavier bottle. People will enjoy it more. You've increased the value, but all you've done is put it in a different kind of bottle. And so you're shifting perception. And all brands understand this, that how much of the value of any consumer brand is in the fact that the brand creates a better experience for people. So that's perceptual leverage. There's labor leverage, and labor leverage it's one of the oldest kinds of, it's probably the oldest kind of leverage, where you understood that you can do so much yourself, but if you add other people, they can do that much more, and that creates leverage. It creates, if you wanted to plant vegetables, you wanted to plant rice, and it was just you, but if you could get to the point that you could add 10 more people, they can plant a lot more rice, and then you have leverage. You have the ability to do more than you could do by yourself. Technology leverage is as old as labor leverage. So it started with tools, the ability that if you built a tool that helped you plant the rice, then you had leverage. You could plant twice as much rice as before for the same amount of effort. You had leverage. You had the ability to expand the productivity of what you were doing. But technology leverage runs all the way up to today, and all the technology that we use to do things. The fourth one is network leverage. And network leverage can be quite complex. There's lots of different forms of network leverage. But we see a lot of network leverage in modern social networks and digital technology, where the value of the network is increasing with the size of the network. And so you don't necessarily have to do anything. More people join the network, and the value of the network increases without you having to do anything. And so that's a big lever that you have to create more value. Another really old form of leverage is capital leverage, but it's still really important today, which is the ability to add money to something to increase the amount of output that you can create. And it was the dominant form of leverage for the 20th century, was how do we use capital to build factories to produce more things, so capital as leverage. The sixth one is product leverage, which is how do you create a product? How do you pull together a bunch of different things and a supply chain and a value chain in a way that you can repeatedly deliver that? And rather than trying to do something different every time, have the ability to produce the same thing every time and produce it for cheaper costs. And then finally, media leverage, which is how do you produce a piece of media that you can then sell multiple times, whether that's some music or a podcast or a video series or write a book. It's how do you produce something that can then be repeated and delivered. You don't have to redo the podcast every time someone listens to it. You have leverage there, especially in digital media. Cool. So we'll come back to these, so don't worry if you didn't grab them all the first time. But those are our concepts of business model leverage. Whew, I'll take a breath. I'm probably going a little bit too fast, but I only have an hour, so I want to do as much as I can. All right. So let's have a think now about strategic leverage. So strategic leverage It's not the main thing we want to talk about today, but I wanted to mention it because it is important. And it's methods of influencing markets and systems to achieve a goal, but they're not part of your business model. So strategic leverage is often high growth. You can have very strong competitive advantages from strategic leverage. It derives power from control or influence over a whole system and not just over a product. It can often be unfair and monopolistic or monopsonistic. And it relates to a sort of level of strategist thinking. And so it's not the same as just having a product. It's how do you influence a system in a way that you get what you want out of that system. And some of that strategic leverage we call dirty strategic leverage. And so that's things like force or bribery or blackmail or lobbying the government to get what you want, political influence, things like that. So that's not your business model creating that advantage. That's something else that you use to create that advantage. And so there's lots of that in our history, which is very negative, but there's some strategic leverage that is very useful too, especially when you're trying to have impact. And oftentimes that's about system infrastructure, where you can build system infrastructure that allows a system to function better and then have some control over that system and manipulate it so that good things happen. And one of the places we see a lot of strategic leverage is in the FANG companies, which is Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, I forget what the other one is, Amazon, that's it. So they have lots of strategic leverage, and they do that through owning whole markets, having access to data that no one else has access to, having ownership of platforms and the ability to throw people off platforms. So they're not just product companies, they end up owning a whole system and being able to influence it. So we're not going to talk much about it today, but strategic leverage is still an important one to understand. And then finally, I think one thing is really important as startup entrepreneurs for us to understand is the idea of compounding leverage. Because a lot, especially if we're in the digital space, a lot of leverage is kind of hidden. It's not obvious, and you don't notice it until it starts to happen. And so as we think about our business models and our products and how we're going to do things, compounding leverage can sometimes be the most powerful thing. And so sometimes leverage compounds over time. So the simplest version is compounding returns. If you invest money and you get, 7% interest a year, then every 10 years you're going to double the amount of money that you have. And then that figure then compounds for the next 10 years and compounds. And so that's leverage that compounds, leverage that gets stronger every year. It's not just you got an advantage, that advantage gets bigger and bigger each time because it builds on itself. Network effects often work this way, that as networks get bigger and bigger, the value gets more and more, which then attracts more people because it's more valuable, and then the whole thing compounds. And that's where you get things like, Facebook. You get these giant network effects, and that's compounding leverage. At some point you can't compete with that because they've got that much compounding already in the system. The third one, technology development, and this is a really important one for digital technology, is that Moore's law and the sort of exponential technology curve means that the power that's driving digital business models is growing exponentially and compounding. And so what is valuable today or performs well today is going to perform, 1.5 times better or twice as well in 18 months' time if you can harness those curves and compound that leverage with Moore's law. Then you get something pretty amazing. So something that looks just marginal, like it only just works when you start, in a couple of years' time is really powerful because you've been able to improve the speed of everything as all the technology's gotten faster and cheaper. Usage is often how compounding happens, and that often happens with data. The more people use something, the more data you can collect on them, the more value you can extract from that data, and then that whole process compounds and gets bigger and bigger. Also knowledge and skills, the more knowledge you have, the more you can deliver, the more knowledge you gain from being in the market, the more value you can create, and then that compounds too. There's lots of other ways that things compound, but the point here is that often compounding leverage is non-obvious. No one realizes until it happens, and then you go, man, where did that come from? But the entrepreneurs that saw it were like, yep, no one will see how valuable this is until one day it's incredibly valuable and they'll wonder where it came from. Okay, so that's compounding leverage. How are we doing for time? We're doing okay. All right. So important to remember that your impact model needs leverage as well. That the way you deliver your impact, you need to design to be powerful. If it's a really inefficient way of delivering impact, then you're not being as successful as you could be. So in the same way you look inside your business model and say, where is the leverage I can find? You need to look inside your impact model, the way you're trying to help people or help the environment, and say, where are the levers here? How can I make this more powerful so I can deliver more impact for the same amount of work or the same amount of money? So we'll talk about that too. Okay. So let's talk about economies of scale. So I learned about economies of scale 100 years ago when I was at high school. And it was kind of boring and I didn't think it was very interesting. But in the last, say, 5 or 6 years, economies of scale have become very interesting to me. And the reason they became interesting is because economies of scale are how leverage becomes real inside a business model. So a leverage dynamic in a business model needs to be scaled, and it gets scaled through economies of scale. This probably sounds a bit complex, but it's not really that complex. The way it works is business model leverage is realized through economies of scale. And that is the unit cost decreases as production increases in line with the leverage that's in your business model. So every business, when you've figured out what your business model is, needs to create this infrastructure here in the picture, whereby the tasks and responsibilities and pieces of the process get broken down into layers so that they can be delivered. And within those layers, your leverage has a fit. So I'll explain that in better detail. So if you imagine a startup, so a startup on the left operates kind of like a brain, in its job is to invent and be creative and create new things. There's high uncertainty and high volatility. Lots of change, lots of things that don't make sense. You've got your 5,000 things in your head every day. That's a startup. But then once you've figured out something that's going to work, you can't stay a startup because you can't turn that idea into scale. And so you've got to turn it into a business. And in a business, you have to build the structure. And that structure is what gives you economies of scale and leverage and the ability to make money and be successful. You create a low uncertainty, low volatility environment where not much changes, and you know if I do this, if I create this product for this much money, I can sell it, I can make a profit, I can deliver my impact, and I can wrap a bow around that and just keep doing that. And this is the real challenge when you go from where you are now, which is we're in a startup environment and we're trying lots of new things, to flipping over into we're in business environment. We need to build infrastructure because that infrastructure is how we will deliver our success. So economies of scale, again, lots of words here. Don't worry too much about them. You can follow up on them later. Economies of scale are how your business model leverage is delivered. So media leverage, it's all about selling your content at increasing sales. How many books can I sell? How many podcast listens can I get? How do I increase the amount of scale, because that makes my business model work? Technology leverage might be about increasing efficiencies. How do I deliver the same product for less money because I'm employing technology to make the process faster? Network leverage might be my costs fall with the size of the network. So it's mostly fixed costs, and as I add new users, it doesn't cost me any more money, so my costs fall. So it's that leverage dynamic of network leverage that only works when we start to get economies of scale in our business model. So economies of scale are about exploitation and not exploration. So a startup is all about exploration. We're exploring, we're being flexible, we've got 5,000 things in our head. And then business model economies of scale is exploitation. We know what it is, now we're going to make it, and we're going to make it fast and efficient and make it work. And you need to get the point from exploration to exploitation. You need to get that bit right. To build scale, you have to build infrastructure. So if you're making a product, you'll have to build factories. If you're doing a delivery service, you'll need to buy vehicles and maintenance and all of that kind of stuff. If you're doing a TV show, you'll need the studio, you'll need staff, you need cameras. So you have to build infrastructure to allow you to deliver the thing. And the thing with infrastructure is once you have it, it's very hard to change. And so this is why, this is the fundamental reason that big businesses are so bad at innovating, is they have all built infrastructure so that they can deliver economies of scale and create a business model that can work. But then when something comes along and says, no, you have to change that, they don't want to change it. It's very hard to change it because it is this big solid thing that doesn't change. And that is why a startup like you can sneak up and go, hey, we're flexible. We can hold 5,000 things in our head. We can change and we can evolve and we can do all of that. And the big business is left standing there going, we can't change. You know, the best we can do is buy you. We'll buy you and then that'll make it better. So this is a very important thing to understand about how startups and businesses are different things. And these days, the problem is businesses need to learn to adapt because everything is changing so quickly. They've all built infrastructure, but they can't stay the same because they will just die. And so this is the challenge of the world at the moment, is they're all trying to figure out how to change. And so maybe they engage with startups, or they buy startups, or they, you know, run accelerator programs. Okay. One other thing I think is important to point out is that digital business models are very, very different from traditional business models. And they're very different in the amount of leverage they have. And this is a really important thing to understand. They scale differently. The physics that control them is different. But not all business models that use technology and digital things are digital business models. So if we look at a traditional business model, you've got in blue here, you've got the business, and they've got their structure of their scaling structure. So their fractal layers within which they deliver their economies of scale. And they may use some technology. So they may have a CRM to create efficiencies in the sales process. They may automate the manufacturing process. They may do some supply chain inventory management with technology. They might do some e-commerce as a sales channel. But this doesn't make them a digital business model, because it's the same as a traditional business model. It's that same level of structure, but it's just little efficiencies, incremental efficiencies along the way. Your CRM makes it a little bit more efficient. Your inventory management makes it a little bit more efficient, but it doesn't change the business model. But a digital business model, which is in pink, is fundamentally different. If you can see, they have extremely high leverage. So instead of having these layers that roll out evenly, you have a layer that just multiplies. And so you have zero marginal cost business models. You build something once and you sell it 100 million times. And so this is the high leverage that we're looking for in digital business models. And we need to make sure we don't confuse that with just the incremental leverage. Because you're using technology, it doesn't mean it's a digital business model and it's going to grow like a digital business model. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's look at a few examples, because this will just help us understand a little bit more about what this is. So if you look at, say, LinkedIn, I just picked companies that I thought everyone would know, because then we won't have to sort of discuss what they are. But if we pick LinkedIn, and then we think about what is the core business model leverage they have, and then what is the incremental leverage that they might be using. And if we think it through, if we look at LinkedIn, which is a business social network, so the really powerful leverage they have is network leverage, which is the network effects that drive adoption, that drive value of the network for users. The more people on LinkedIn, the more valuable it is to all the other users. And so as that grows, it gets more and more valuable. And it also starts to generate more and more data that then becomes valuable, that they can sell to other people, and this thing just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful. They've got technology leverage because they've built software, and they can deliver it near zero marginal cost. So they get one more user or 1 million more users, it doesn't really cost them any more money. And so they've got this lever, this leverage that allows them to get more and more users for the value of their business to get higher and higher and higher, with their costs not really going up at all. And so, yeah, the network leverage and the technology leverage are fundamental. The other one that you pretty much always see is capital leverage, which is they get money from venture capital, and that allows them to grow faster than they would normally grow. If you had to start LinkedIn without venture capital, it probably wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to build the platform to make it good enough for anyone to use before you would have any money to actually pay for more of the platform to be built. So they get tens of millions of dollars of venture capital, and that allows them to build the platform that can create the value, and they can start this whole cycle of leverage. There's some perceptual leverage that they have, which is brand development, but this is mostly incremental leverage. It's not the main thing. It's just something that they do to improve things along the way, and labor leverage and things like that. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's look at another one. I'm not sure if everyone knows Warby Parker, but they're pretty simple. So they're, excuse me, they're a glasses company, and they sell glasses online, and they have some stores too, and they do a one-for-one deal. So if you buy a pair of glasses, someone in the developing world will get free glasses. And they've distributed, I don't know, 3-4 million pairs of glasses so far. So if we look at the leverage in the Warby Parker business model, so there's technology leverage there. So what they pioneered was online sales for glasses. There wasn't a lot of online sales for glasses before they started. So their development went into how do we do online sales? So they built this digital try-on thing where you can digitally try the glasses on. So you you can choose them without having to go into a store. And then they had a home try-on program where you chose 5 pairs of glasses and they would send them to your house and you would try them on and then you would send them back. And so that was the real high leverage move for them, was they were able to get traction and build a business that didn't have to have the cost of all the bricks and mortar shops. And so that was the big lever that they had. And they used capital leverage. They had $300 million in capital investment over their lifetime. And so that allowed them to then grow, and we know now how capital leverage works. And then the other incremental leverage they had was perceptual leverage, brand development, and then technology and labor leverage. They built factories and they made them efficient and all of that. And the point being that it's important that they did that, but that wasn't the main thing that made their business model work. So we call that incremental leverage. And the impact, it has leverage too, because it runs on the business model, which is the more glasses they sell, the more impact they have. And so the impact benefits from the leverage in the business model. Okay, let's do one more. So Tesla, most people don't think of Tesla as a social enterprise, but Tesla's goal was to move the electric car market forward by 10 years to fight climate change. And that was Elon Musk's goal when he created Tesla. And so he felt that that was the highest leverage move he could make to combat climate change. And so they use a combination of product leverage, so developing new products, new cars that they can produce at scale. So it's the Tesla car product, the Model S, the Model X, the Model Y. They use technology leverage. So they build factories that are products. So the factory itself becomes a product, and it's automated all the way through. So they innovated in the factory space using technology leverage. They use capital leverage. They had, I don't know, $30 billion worth of capital investment to help them get moving. And then, yeah, brand leverage and labor leverage and all of that is incremental. They also had very powerful negative network effects, because the existing car industry has petrol stations everywhere, whereas there were no EV, no charging stations. And so there were already very powerful network effects against Tesla, but they managed to overcome that and move the market forward. Cool. And the impact is driven from that leverage, because more sales of cars moves the industry forward, which is how they're trying to have impact. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, but again, you can go over and look at it and think about it more slowly when you want to. The other thought is, if you look at mature businesses, they have leverage and economies of scale all throughout their businesses. So if you look at a company like Apple, my brother works at Apple, and I think they generate $2.5 million of revenue for every employee at Apple. And they do, my brother, I don't know how much he earns, maybe $100,000 or $200,000 a year, but he generates $2.5 million of revenue, and that's because of leverage. Because everyone's activities are multiplied inside the business model. So the brand creates leverage, the technology creates leverage, the capital creates leverage, the design creates leverage, the manufacturing, the supply chain, every single thing is optimized to create leverage inside the business model. Cool. So yeah, as you start to mature, that's what businesses do, is they figure out where all of those opportunities are. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're doing okay. I think we're going to make it. All right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was how you can think about using this way of thinking to improve your business models for your ventures as you go forward. And really it's about how can you generate ideas about how to have more leverage in your business model and make it stronger. I see many, many social enterprises and impact-driven businesses, and I look at the business model and it's just not quite there. You know, you kind of look at it and go, if you scale this and you scale all your costs, it's not quite going to work. You know, it'll almost work, but it won't quite get there, which means you'll always be short of money, which means no one's going to invest in you because they'll know that it's not quite going to work. And you're going to end up just kind of being like a charity, just trying to get by and not actually making enough money to be successful. And so what we want to be able to do here is look clearly at our business model and go, what could we change that might add leverage? Is it a big thing that will fundamentally change the business model and suddenly it'll be different? Or is it incremental leverage where we go, we can change this and we can change that and we can use some technology here and we can add some capital here to shape it up and get it to work? And that's the constant work of evolving a business model to be successful over time. So the way we think about doing that is we use the Social Link Canvas as a guide for that. So I've been using this for probably 7 or 8 years now, working with ventures to help them figure out how to do this. So here are the steps. Oh, firstly, here's the Social Link Canvas in case you haven't seen it before. So it's basically a business modeling tool for impact-driven businesses. And so it starts at the top left with purpose. What's the purpose of your venture? Why are you doing this? Why does it matter? Why is it important? And then you understand the business model components of who is your customer? What problem do they have that you can solve? What's your unique value proposition? What's your solution? What channels are you going to use to reach your customer? How does your revenue model work? How do you charge for your product or service? What's your cost structure? What costs do you have to pay? What are your key metrics to understand that the business model works, and what's your unfair advantage? And those are the kind of fundamental business model dynamics. And then across the top, what's your impact model? And the impact model it's a very simple version, and it just says, what's the issue that you're trying to solve? Is it hunger? Is it mental health, for a certain community? Is it plastics in the ocean? What's the issue you're trying to solve? Who are the participants? What's the activity that you're going to do? You're going to run a counseling program. You're going to sponsor organizations to clean up the ocean. You're going to deliver food aid. What's your activity? And then what's the short-term outcomes? Short-term outcomes, maybe someone with mental health issues gets counseling. The medium-term outcomes, maybe 1 year later, they start to feel happier, they're more positive, they communicate better, they're better in their work. And then the long-term outcomes, they better employment, more success, happier lives. And then the impact, sort of what happens in the community over maybe 10 years. How does the world change as a result? So that's your impact model. And then what we do is we look for the points of leverage inside that model. So we start by, we map out your current business and impact model in the Social Link Canvas. And you can get a copy of this at sociallinkcanvas.com. So you spend maybe an hour, you take your current business model and you map it all into the canvas, and then you apply the 7 types of leverage. So you apply perceptual leverage. Where might we be able to change how people are thinking about something? So that might be to do with your value proposition. And you go, oh, we could increase the value that people are perceiving in this by changing how they think about it. Great example of this I always think of is in New Zealand, we always used to have lots of second-hand clothing shops. So people would sell clothes second-hand. And so you take a shirt that maybe cost $100, and then you sell it in a second-hand clothing shop for $5 or $10. And then one day somebody had the idea to create vintage clothing shops. And vintage clothing is suddenly a lot cooler than second-hand clothing. And so if you put the same shirt in a vintage clothing shop, maybe the $100 shirt you can sell for $50 rather than $5. So you have 10x the value of the shirt by changing how people think about it. And that 10x in value increase, you're making an extra $45 on that shirt, can then fund the rest of the business model, can fund the impact model. So you might think about how to use perceptual leverage in the value proposition, as an example. You might think about labor leverage and go, well, how can we use labor in different ways to improve the ability that we have to produce things? Maybe use volunteer labor to reduce costs or something like that. You might use technology leverage, and there's a million ways that you could use technology leverage across the value proposition, across the solution. You could build technology leverage into the channels that you use, if they're online channels, figure out a way of creating compounding leverage in the online channels. Or it might be that you use it in the impact model and figure out a way of delivering more impact because you're able to use technology in clever ways. You might figure out how to use network leverage. You know, perhaps you can take the community that you're working in, if you're doing a social enterprise that's community-based, and go, how could we take some of the network dynamics and start to make them create more value across the network? So there's something like 13 different forms of network leverage. So you could take all 13 of those and go, could we apply any of those to our community in a way that creates more value because of the size of that network? And that can be pretty interesting. Capital leverage, can you think more cleverly about how you apply capital to your business model in different places? Maybe product leverage, you take something that you're delivering as a service and figure out how to turn it into a product that you can reliably deliver. Maybe use some technology leverage to be able to turn it into a product. And media leverage, is there something in your business model that you could make stronger using media leverage, and maybe marketing channels or something like that? So it can be quite a lot of fun to do this because you can just have lots and lots of ideas across those different components of your business model, across purpose, customers, problem, value proposition, all the way through. You can have 100 ideas, and then when you've had some of those ideas, then the third step is innovate on them. Go, how do we figure out what ideas might be worth testing? What ideas might likely work to make our business model stronger? And so develop these ideas and then validate these ideas with customers in the real world. So go out and actually test them and try them out and see if they work. And then get to that point where you go, hey, these work, let's build infrastructure out of them. Let's build a model that can scale because we're confident that it's going to work. And then that becomes your job to take that idea of how you can create more leverage. And once you know it's going to work, you then build the scaling model so your economies of scale can give you that benefit over time. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Like I say, you can go back and work through this again and again, so you don't need me here to be able to tell you. So what I'd like you to do is have a think about your venture and where you might find more business leverage. So in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I'll open it to questions. But before that, have a think, have a sit down and a think, and maybe if you're sitting in the same room as your business partners, maybe have some conversation with them and think, did anything jump out into your mind about how you might be able to take part of your business model and add more leverage to it based on this? And I'll take us back to here. Hopefully you can read those headings so that you can look at those. But just take 2 or 3 minutes and have a think about how might you add more leverage to your business model. And then you can ask questions about that if you want to ask questions about it when we have questions. So just let's sit quietly or set a timer for 3 minutes and have a think or a discussion about how that might work. We need some music or something.
Oke, jadi buat teman-teman semuanya mungkin bisa dibantu untuk kita sama-sama berdiskusi ya dengan Rowan ya. Karena ini merupakan momen yang begitu spesial nih buat kita ya, kapan lagi bisa diskusi langsung dengan Rowan.
Yeah, we're encouraging the participants who are joining in Zoom. Feel free to discuss with Rowan. Feel free to open your mic. And if you're not confident with English, feel free to do Bahasa Indonesia instead. We're here to help you out.
Yes. Dan mungkin untuk materi yang didiskusikan bersama dengan Rowan ini terkait dengan business model. Oh oke, Arif sudah raise hand, boleh di-unmute dulu mikrofonnya? Silahkan.
Halo, selamat siang.
Pagi.
Selamat pagi. Ya, harus gitu ya.
Silakan Mas.
Aku izin nggak pakai kamera ya?
Boleh, silakan.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. Very insightful about the topics.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe just I would love to validate what kind of things that we've done. But first of all, let me introduce the starter first. So I'm from ibuna.id. We are providing mental health services through online and offline. Then focus is to increase the user's productivity. So what interests with your topics is maybe I'd like to share about what ibuna.id already done. For instance, like we do if gimana jelasannya?
Boleh Mas, di bahasa Indonesia aja nanti kita
nggak
ada.
apa-apa ya, bahasa
Ya
Indonesia,
nggak apa-apa,
Mbak.
sok silakan. Ada
Nggak bisa bahasa
translatornya di
Inggris.
sini. Silakan Mas.
Oke. Jadi aktivitinya itu adalah kita menyediakan sesi konseling premium. Jadi setiap satu sesi konseling premium itu kita aktivitinya adalah kita mengkampanyekan ke users itu adalah setiap kamu menggunakan satu sesi konseling kita itu kamu menyediakan satu sesi konseling yang gratis buat orang lain di luar sana yang butuh. Jadi setiap satu orang users yang menggunakan servicesnya itu dia ibaratnya kayak membelikan atau ngebayarin lah satu sesi online konseling lagi buat orang-orang di luar sana yang belum
Secara gratis
belum
gitu Mas ya,
affordable
seperti Warby Parker.
untuk
So Rowan,
afford
what Arif is saying
the
that
sessions gitu. Nah itu tuh sebetulnya bisa jadi
Mas Arif.
kayak model
Mas Arif.
leverage tertentu nggak sih kayak gitu menurut Rowan gitu. Itu satu dulu kali ya.
Oke, tadi pertanyaannya boleh diulang di akhir, kalimat terakhir.
Ya, apakah itu bisa jadi salah satu, apakah itu termasuk salah satu leverage dari business modelnya dari sisi kayak gitu? Kalau apa namanya yang dilakukan sama marketing activity-nya, say misalnya sepatu Toms itu kan dia kalau setiap ada orang beli satu Toms sepatu gitu, dia membeli
Mas Arif,
lagi satu
sedikit-sedikit ya, maaf,
sepatu
saya
buat
bantu translate
orang-orang
dulu
yang
ke
lagi
Rowan.
import sepatu di luar sana
Ya,
gitu.
baik
Gitu.
Mas Arif, kita kupas satu persatu ya, dibantu dari Mas Randy, silahkan.
So Rowan, what Arif was saying is that he's currently starting up a business in providing online and offline counseling in regard to mental health. So what makes them different, this is also probably quite similar with what this Warby Parker has done in accordance to your previous presentation, that each counseling that is purchased by each person will be able to be enjoyed by some others too, for free. So Arif's question is, how do you see this as a leverage?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's one of those things where if you don't have a powerful point of leverage in the model, it's the kind of model that can just be very, very hard. So, because essentially if you try and run a counseling business, that's a hard business. It's hard to make it profitable. But if you're trying to run that same business and provide a whole bunch of things for other people that you don't get paid for, it's even harder. And so what I would say is you need to find the point of leverage to actually make it really work. I mean, a good example would be Tom's Shoes. So they do a one-for-one shoe model. And, you know, for every pair of shoes they sell, they give away a pair of shoes. And I think they've given away 60 million pairs of shoes or something. So they're really successful. But what they've managed to do is spend no money on advertising. So I think Nike spends $2.8 billion a year on advertising, and Tom's Shoes spends $0 a year on advertising. And so they've got this lever, which is their ability to get a lot of reach through their channel to customers without having to spend any money. And they do that because they've built this really good brand around their mission. And so people share the messaging around Tom's via social media because everyone wants to be associated with a brand that makes them feel good and makes them feel like they're helping in the world. And so that's really the point of leverage that they've created, is this ability to get, you know, essentially hundreds of millions of dollars worth of advertising for free, and then they can take those hundreds of millions of dollars and spend them on delivering the shoes. And so, yeah, I'd really, if I was you, I'd be really looking at where can we create that leverage so that you don't end up in a position where you just scale a model that's very expensive and you don't get to a point where it's actually powerful and it's producing more than it's consuming. Otherwise, yeah, you could end up in that position where you're just kind of breaking even and it never gets easy. It always gets hard. So that would be my question, would be, what do you think you have that is leveraged inside that model? Like, is there something you've got that that other people don't have that makes it powerful? And if you don't think there is something, then I'd really recommend you to do some of what I've been talking about and actually try and figure out how to find that.
Ya, Mas Arif, mungkin mau ada follow up, tadi ada pertanyaan juga dari
Iya,
Rowan.
sebetulnya tadi sama ya. Kita juga inspired. Sebetulnya that activity was inspired by Tom's activity, because every one session, online counseling sessions, premium, after someone pay, and then it refers to another. The person will be paying for another session.
Understood.
For another people.
Yeah. But yeah, oh, sorry, go on.
Okay, because we think that Indonesian people, the culture itself is, what we say is like very kind, because this sort of the campaign would trigger people to at least to break the stigma, at least make themselves brave to go to a counseling sessions. And also, it's a plus that also can pay another people for do the counseling session for free.
Yeah.
Okay.
The challenge becomes, though, are they going to pay more than they would pay to a regular counseling company? And if they're not going to pay more, if they're just going to pay the same amount, where does the extra revenue come from? You know, where's the leverage that creates the ability to do that? That will be the challenge. But if you can prove that they'll pay more, or that you can acquire them for a cheaper price, or some other mechanism in there, then I think, you know, you can make it work. But I think, yeah, just be really clear on what it is that makes it work before you scale it. Otherwise, you end up building infrastructure for the wrong thing. You know, you want to make sure you've got it right first.
All right, the pay more scheme sounds more interesting for me. Thank you, Rowan, for the insight.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask the second questions?
Unfortunately, Arif,
Yes.
we have very limited amount of time, and we would like to
Thank
give
you
the
very
chance
much.
also to other audiences
thank you for
to
the question.
participate. Makasih Arif, sukses ya.
Makasih ya Arif. Baik. Next question.
Yeah, we have another questions coming. The next question is coming from our YouTube audience.
Yes.
The question is from Rahel Lasni. She asks, to those who are just starting their business, according to you, which is more incremental, branding or sales? And is branding invented or created?
Ooh, that's a hard question. Invented or created? I think it very much depends. I think, what would I say? I think both things normally, if you think about a startup, if you look at, say, the social lean canvas, the core of what a startup has to figure out is how to take the customer, find out a problem that they have that you can solve, find out a value proposition they will agree with, and then find a solution that you can deliver. And deliver that solution in a way that you can capture some value and it doesn't cost you too much to do it. You know, so that's your sort of basic of the business model. So at the start, the founders are trying to figure that out. The founders are trying to understand the customer. The founders are trying to understand the problem and the value proposition. And so at that point, it's not really branding and it's not really sales. It's more fundamental. It's more the heart of the business model you're trying to get. And then when you've validated that and you've figured it out and you're ready to scale, then you turn on sales. Then you turn on branding. Then you turn on all of those things. But I'm always worried when I see a startup who's, you know, employed a, you know, head of marketing before they have any customers, because it's the founder's job to figure out how the business model works and who the customer is, you know, and then later on when you're scaling, you can hire people to do that because you already know and they just have to do the thing that you know. And so, yeah, that's what I would say is I wouldn't really call it sales at the start. I'd call it kind of founder customer discovery. And I wouldn't really call it branding at the start either. I would call it value proposition creation, you know. So yeah, that's how I would think about it at the start. And then later on, it's more about the type of business that it is as to what becomes most important, you know, whether it's sales or branding. You know, if it's enterprise, probably sales is the most important thing. If it's consumer, probably brand is the most important thing. But it all very much depends on your market and the type of product you're selling.
Okay, her next question is actually you haven't answered yet. Is branding invented or created?
I don't know. I don't know what that means.
It's more philosophical, I think.
I think it's a creative process. You know, I think branding does have a lot of creative process around it. I don't really think there's much of a difference between invention and creation. I think they're basically the same thing, which is how do you have an idea that might be able to create value for people. And I think if you invent something or create it, for me, it's all the same.
Okay, so another questions. We have one more
last
slot
Yes.
for questions. And the next one is still from our YouTube audience, from Gamma Shahid. The question is, can you share with us some obstacles in social business model, or maybe at least 3 obstacles based on your very experience? in regards to startup business, of
Yeah.
course?
Good question. I think one crucial one is balancing impact and business, impact and profit, because it's a really, really hard one. There's no rule. There's no rule that says, oh, you should do impact first, or oh, you should do profit first, because it all depends on the type of venture that you're doing and the stage that you're at. And so I think balancing that is a real challenge, because I see a lot of people go a long way down the line with impact, and then they can't make a business model work for it. Or they go a long way down the line with a business model, and then it doesn't deliver any impact. And so I always think, I don't know, you're probably city folk. Do you live in the cities? I don't know whether you've ever changed a wheel on a car, but when you change a wheel on a car, if you get a flat tire, you take the wheel off, you put the new wheel on, and then you don't just tighten one nut as tight as it will go, you tighten each nut a little bit at a time. And so I think about this is how you do impact and business model. There's a little bit here, and then we do a little bit here, and then we do a little bit here, and we slowly move the model forward, because the impact model will change over time and the business model will change over time. And so that's the crucial thing to do, is not decide one thing and go really hard on one side or the other. Trying to think what else. The other main thing is you have to agree. Like, the founders have to agree and have a shared understanding of what it is they're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with people with the social link canvas and said, okay, so who's the customer? And no one can agree. You know, so what's the purpose? And no one can agree. You know, and so you're never going to get successful if the founding team can't agree on what it is that you're trying to do. And so I think that's the other really crucial thing, is actually be aligned on what you're doing and how you're doing it. Do we have time for a third one? Or
Yes,
are
we have
out
one
of
final
time?
question.
Yes, this is our last question, Rowan, from
Sure.
one of our participants today, from Agis, from Traktir.
Traktir.
Yes, Traktir. What should be considered to ensure the team is ready to scale up?
Yeah, so for me, and based on what I was talking about today, it's this crucial point. You go from the brain, that is a network where you're trying things out and you've got your 5,000 things, to we're building infrastructure. And when I see people build infrastructure too early, they scale the wrong thing. And so they invest and they build all this stuff, and no one wants their product, and it doesn't work, you know. Or I see them just spinning their wheels in startup mode and then never get to infrastructure. And so it's a really good question, because it's a hard thing to know when. But generally what I see is you start to validate your business model by testing ideas with customers, and then you slowly, as that validation works, you slowly start to produce more things that look more and more like products. So the first bit of validation might be a conversation with a customer, and then maybe you do some kind of version of the product that's really lo-fi, but gives them a sense of what it is. And then you start to do a version of the product, but you made it all yourself in your kitchen, you know? And then as you're starting to kind of get confidence that they're going to buy it, that they'll pay money, that there's enough market, then you can start to then go, okay, let's get a factory, let's spend money, let's, you know. So I think it's that transition from kind of early validation through to, oh, we have what we call problem solution fit. You know, we've got something solid, and then we get to product market fit, and then we get to tooling up a factory or a workforce or something like that. But it's a very good question.
Thank you very much, Rowan. Unfortunately, that was the very last questions for this very sessions, because we have very limited durations.
Yes.
However, we would like to invite you to remain with us, because we're about to have a photo sessions together with you before you leave. We would like to invite all the participants in Zoom. Boleh dinyalakan kameranya, teman-teman. Kita akan undang Anda untuk berfoto bersama ya, ini ya.
Betul sekali. Jadi buat teman-teman yang tadi udah kita himbau ya untuk berdandan dulu, semoga udah selesai ya berdandannya, karena kita bakal foto bersama. Oke.
Yes, can we show all the participants on the screen, please?
Yes, and
don't
please
forget to
do
turn
open your
on.
camera. Yes.
Yes. All right, looking good. Don't forget to smile. So we will count down, Rowan and ladies and gentlemen, 3, 2, 1, and then we will say NextDev, and then you have to say Academy. Right?
Oke, jadi teman-teman nanti kita akan hitung mundur ya
Yes.
dalam hitungan saya nanti ketika kita bilangin NextDev. Teman-teman please jawab dengan lantang, harus teriak gitu ya, dengan teriakin Academy.
Yeah.
Oke?
But also maintaining your look good at the same time.
Yes.
Everyone ready?
Sudah siap?
Silakan Yeni.
Oke, 3, 2, 1, NextDev.
Academy.
Academy.
Oh, sekali lagi boleh ya?
Kali ini boleh gaya bebas, yang mau kasih cinta-cinta manja sarang heo boleh ya.
Free gesture this time. Feel free to give some casual look on my count. 3, 2, 1. NextDev
Academy.
All right, give a virtual applause, ladies and gentlemen. One more time.
Oke,
One last time.
kali ini saya butuh gerakan yang lebih hot ya. Waduh, yang lebih hot.
Gimana tuh ya?
Artinya mungkin boleh lebih leluasa lagi aja, nggak usah terlalu kaku. Kita seru-seruan bareng.
Yes, give us bigger gesture.
Yes. Oke, kita ulangi sekali lagi. 3, 2, 1. NextDev
Academy. All right, give a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Rowan, for your valuable time. We understand it's already late in the evening there, so we would like to allow you to enjoy the rest of your evening.
Once again, thank
Awesome.
you,
Thank you so much.
Rowan Yoman, for your time. Thank you. And
Thank you,
please
it's a
be
pleasure.
safe and
Take
stay
care,
healthy
everyone,
ya.
and good luck.
Yes.
Hopefully. Di New Zealand kebetulan kasus COVID sudah 0.
Sudah 0 nggak
Lebih
kayak-
aman
Oke,
di sana.
Jauh lebih aman, tapi nggak apa-apa. Tetap harus perhatikan. Yang penting sehat adalah hal yang paling utama
Adalah
ya.
kunci cenah. Oke, sekarang kita mau ajak teman-teman sebelum kemudian nanti kita akan mengumumkan Evangelist yang NextDev dan juga pengumuman door prize ya.
Yes.
Kita rehat dulu, kita refreshment
Karena
dulu
tadi
dulu.
ilmunya udah bener-bener ilmu daging, udah lahap banget ya, dicatat semua poin-poin pentingnya, dan sekarang kita bakal rehat sejenak, tetap santai sejenak ya, sambil menyaksikan penampilan spesial nih teman kita dari siapa sih?
Kita saksikan Kezia
Manopo.
Manopo.
Halo Kezia, boleh dong sapa-sapa kita dulu.
Halo, hai semuanya.
Terdengar jelas ya suara Yeni yang tentunya kalah merdu dengan suaramu.
Pasti dong, saya emang gak ada apa-apanya ya, Cek. Oke, so Kezia bakal nyanyi berapa puluh lagu nih?
50 lah.
Waduh.
Bener
oke.
loh, kita tagih loh, namanya juga netizen ya, suka menagih ya.
Dicicil sehari satu. Oke, hari ini akan ada 3 lagu ya, bener dari Kezia ya?
Iya,
Oke.
betul sekali.
So anyway, sebelum kita mulai Kezia, mungkin boleh kita cek dulu soundnya dari gitarnya, dari suara
boleh.
pintu di belakang, suara jendela, suara Kezia, kucingnya, peliharaannya.
Enggak,
Boleh?
gitarnya aja cukup ya.
Oh gitarnya ini cukup ya, gitarnya
Boleh
cukup.
digonjeng-gonjeng?
Boleh kenalin semua ini Mason.
Hai Mason.
Mason.
Siapanya tuh Kak
Oke,
Kezia?
gitarnya boleh dimainkan lagi sembari kita akan adjust suaranya,
Ya.
boleh dinaikkan volumenya. Gitarnya belum terdengar jelas.
Ya.
Baru
Gimana?
sayup saja.
Boleh kita coba sekali lagi gonjrengannya?
Gonjreng.
Alright,
Oke.
sekarang sudah terdengar.
Sudah terdengar ya? Kalau gitu
sabar.
langsung aja kita persilahkan. Ini dia
Kezia
Kezia
Manopo.
Manopo.
Halo semuanya yang di rumah. Kita nyanyi bareng-bareng aja ya sambil istirahat kan. Santai-santai aja. Mungkin karena di rumah nggak banyak yang lihat, mau nyanyi sekenceng mungkin juga nggak masalah. Pertama kali berjumpa denganmu kekasihku, dunia seolah kado untukku. Makan pun tak enak, tidurku pun tiada nyenyak. Selalu teringat, oh dirimu, ini kau namanya. Kisah sedang jatuh cinta, mengapa semua begitu indah dilihat, begitu sedap dipandang, seolah ku ingin selalu tersenyum, tapi aku malu padamu. Aku ucapkan terasa indah saja, selalu teringat dan tak lupa. Kau katakan kau sayang pada diriku kasihku, masih banyak lagi rayuanmu. Ini kau namanya, kisah sedang jatuh cinta. Mengapa semua begitu indah dilihat, begitu sedap dipandang, seolah ku ingin selalu tersenyum, tapi aku malu padamu. Aku malu, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu. Ini kau namanya, yang sedang jatuh cinta. Mengapa semua begitu indah dilihat, begitu sedap dipandang, seolah ku ingin selalu tersenyum, tapi aku padamu. Oh, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu. Oh, pada dirimu aku malu, aku malu, aku malu. Aku malu, aku malu. Aku malu, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu, aku malu. Thank you. Itu tadi Prahara Cinta, maksudnya. Oke, next, gue mau bawain satu lagu. Kalau kalian semua ada yang anak TikTok, sempat viral beberapa waktu dikit di TikTok. Judulnya Week dari SWB. I don't know what it is that you've done to me, but it caused me to act in such a crazy way. Whatever it is that you do, and you do what you're doing, baby, it's a feeling that I don't understand. 'Cause my heart starts beating triple times, with thoughts of loving you on my mind. I can't figure out just what to do when the cause and cure is you. I get so weak in the knees, I can hardly speak, I lose all control, and something takes over me in a daze, and it's so amazing, it's not a phase. I want you to stay with me by my side. I swallow my pride, and your love is so sweet, and knocks me right off my feet. Oh, can't explain why your love makes me weak. Time after time after time, I've tried to fight it. Your love is strong, it keeps on holding on. Persistence is down when your around starts fading. In my condition, I don't wanna be alone. 'Cause my heart starts beating triple times with thoughts of loving you on my mind. I can't figure out just what to do when the cause and cure is you. I get so weak in the knees, I can hardly speak. I lose all control, and something takes over me in a daze, and it's so amazing. It's not a phase. I want you to stay with me by my side. I swallow my pride, and your love is so sweet. It knocks me right off of my feet. Can't explain why your love it makes me weak. I've tried hard to fight it. No way can I deny it. Your love so sweet. It knocks me off my feet. I get so weak in the knees, I can hardly speak. I lose all control, and something takes over me in a daze, and it's so amazing. It's not a phase. I want you to stay with me by my side. I swallow my pride, and your love is so sweet. It knocks me right off my feet. Oh, can't explain why your love makes me weak. I get so weak in the knees, I can hardly speak. I lose all control, and something takes over me in a daze, and it's so amazing. It's not a phase. I want you to stay with me by my side. I swallow my pride, and your love is so sweet, and knocks me right off of my feet. I can't explain why your love it makes me. Can't explain why your love it makes me. I can't explain why your love it makes me weak. Thank you. Tadi Week dari SWB. Sekarang lagu terakhir dari gue. Lagu terakhir dari aku. Yang lagi hype juga, dan personally gue suka banget sama lagu ini. Itu dari Discoria, Lale Manino dan Eva Celia juga. Judulnya Krisha. Terus gue mau so-soan shaker gitu ceritanya. Semoga berhasil. So yang di rumah semuanya, kita nyanyi bareng-bareng nanti. Thank you. Andai aku bisa menjadi seperti yang kau minta, ku jadi juwita. Kala cinta menggoda, tak peduli jika surga dan neraka tak pernah ada. Yang penting kau ada. Meski tanpa panah asmara, mengapa sabda alam berdua satukan kisah kita bersama. Cintaku bertepuk harap yang tak ada, rintihan dada asmara. Ingin ku kembali ke masa remaja, serasa gali dan rata yang ku mau kau untukku. Meskipun kau tak rindu, engkau percik pesona, wahai angin malam, bantu aku merepi alam. Meskipun kidung ini terlalu, ku yakin badai pasti berlalu. Lilin-lilin kecil pun merayu lincah hatimu. Cintaku bertepuk harap yang tak ada, rintihan nada asmara. Ingin ku kembali ke masa remaja, terasa galih dan mata yang ku mau kau untukku. Meskipun kau tak rindu, engkau aku suka. Ternyata cinta di hadapan hatimu hanya kesendian lain. Cintaku bertepuk harap yang tak ada, rintihan dada asmara. Ingin ku kembali ke masa remaja, terasa galih dan benar yang ku mau kau untukku. Meskipun kau tak rindu, engkau aku suka. Cintaku bertepuk harap yang tak ada, rintihan dada asmara. Kau kehidupanku, meski kau tak tahu ada aku di hidupmu. Yang ku mau kau untukku, meskipun kau tak rindu, engkau aku suka. Terima kasih semuanya.
Yeay, terima kasih Kezia Manopo. Keren banget, terima kasih sudah bikin kita relax. Teman-teman yang mau dengar lebih lanjut lagi bisa ke Spotify atau Apple Music ya Kezia Manopo.
Terima kasih banyak.
Alright.
Oke, dan kita mungkin pengen ingetin lagi, yes, karena tadi ada muncul pertanyaan Randy ya, teman-teman dari YouTube yang bertanya ke kita nih terkait dengan pemenang pertanyaan terbaik.
Oke,
Mbok yo sabar ya, nanti tenang, ini kita berdua sama-sama menepati janji
Pasti
ya.
kok, bukan hanya janji manis.
Betul sekali. Jadi buat teman-teman semuanya please stay tune terus aja karena untuk pengumumannya itu akan kita langsungkan di akhir acara.
Dan akhir acaranya sebentar lagi setelah kita umumkan Evangelist NextDev.
Yes.
Tapi sebelumnya pasti banyak yang masih bertanya-tanya ya, 3 bulan prosesnya
Ngapain
tuh seperti
aja
apa sih
sih?
pelatihannya.
Ya,
Nah ada video rangkuman testimoni dari para NextDev Academy participants-nya, finalisnya. Kita akan putarkan berikut ini.
Selama ngikutin NextDev, bagi kami Jagal.id itu sebuah pengalaman yang menyenangkan sekali karena selama ngikutinnya bisa benar-benar bantu kami untuk semangat, lebih semangat lagi buat mendalamin pekerjaan kami, mengembangkan startup kami, dan di sana kita bisa belajar banyak banget hal-hal baru yang benar-benar mind blowing lah menurut saya.
Menurut saya sih kalau paling berkesan tentunya mentoring sih. Karena menurut kami merasa banyak tersadarkan lah dengan hal-hal yang baru yang mungkin belum pernah kepikiran sebelumnya gitu. Apalagi waktu saya di mentoring sama Mas Jai gitu.
Kita ikut NextDev Academy itu sebenarnya tahun 2019 ya, dari Yogyakarta, dan pada saat itu kami sangat senang sekali karena pada akhirnya setelah 1 tahun validasi di saat itu produk kita akhirnya mendapatkan pengakuan gitu.
Selama kurang lebih 3 bulan saya menjalani proses akademi ini, saya mendapatkan banyak sekali manfaat tentunya. Yang intinya adalah bagaimana cara kita bisa menjalankan bisnis secara efisien dan efektif. Dan yang paling saya senangi adalah bagaimana kita di pairing atau dipasangkan dengan mentor-mentor yang backgroundnya adalah successful founders.
Pengalaman yang paling berkesan selama saya mengikuti NextDev Academy itu ada 2 yang paling berkesan. Yang pertama adalah terutama di webinar, karena webinarnya benar-benar memberikan insight yang selama ini kita nggak pernah tahu. Contoh, di bidang digital marketing itu selain pematerinya memang sangat mumpuni, ilmu-ilmu yang diberikan menurut saya ilmu mahal, ilmu daging yang nggak akan saya temui di misal di YouTube atau di materi-materi yang lain. Dan itu hanya bisa saya temukan di NextDev Academy.
Kami mendapatkan banyak sekali informasi-informasi yang berharga bagi kami, khususnya datang dari praktisi-praktisi startup teknologi di Indonesia, yang mana mereka memberikan informasi yang luar biasa berharga bagi scale up kami.
Seru banget ikutan ajang The NextDev karena dapat banyak banget manfaatnya. Tentunya networking, kita bakal ketemu sama teman-teman yang punya misi yang sama dan startup-startup yang keren banget yang bisa jadi pembelajaran bareng-bareng. Yang kedua, kita akan dapetin pengetahuan. Tentunya ada banyak masalah yang akan kita hadapi ketika kita ngebangun startup kita gitu, dan pengetahuan-pengetahuan dan insight baru itu akan sangat berguna banget buat kita implementasiin di startup kita. Dan yang ketiga adalah mentor. Kita akan ketemu sama mentor-mentor yang luar biasa dengan pengalaman yang luar biasa yang bisa kasih kita advice untuk startup kita.
Di NextDev ini kita nggak hanya belajar tentang konsep, tapi tentang gimana caranya mengimplementasikan konsep-konsep tersebut pada bisnis yang sedang kita kembangkan. Jadi pada akhirnya kita bisa fokus untuk solve masalah-masalah apa saja yang benar-benar harus kita selesaikan.
Impact yang didapatkan adalah kami mempelajari cara mendapatkan kepercayaan user yang memberikan kami pandangan yang berbeda terhadap gimana caranya kita melakukan suatu marketing dan juga gimana cara kita melakukan suatu marketing kepada di rural area, terutama kepada para petani.
Since then, our NextDev journey has been amazing. We've joined multiple workshops where we've learned from the best people in the startup ecosystem of Indonesia on how we can grow our startup and take it to the next level.
Kita sebagai founder bisa banyak, cara tim juga bisa banyak belajar dari expert dan mentor yang ahli pada bidangnya, yang sangat kompeten. Dan juga kita sebagai seorang founder startup, kita bisa banyak berdiskusi dengan founder-founder startup yang telah lebih dahulu berkecimpung di dunia startup digital Indonesia.
Perubahannya signifikan sih. Saya akhirnya memutuskan sampai untuk pivot yang bisnis, lalu mengukur dari segala lini produksi, distribusi, marketing, semua itu terukur. Dan menurut saya ketika kita bisa melihat bisnis kita secara on detail ya, itu sangat luar biasa.
Saya adalah adanya mereka di sini sih gitu. Mungkin bukan hanya mentoring, but bukan pada saat sesi mentoring aja, tapi mungkin lebih erat lagi hubungan antara NextDev dengan Telkomselnya.
Semoga acara ini cukup berjalan dan bisa ditingkatkan lebih lanjut. Sebenarnya agak sedikit kurang jika waktunya hanya sekitar 3 bulan, dan kami sebenarnya cukup paham banyak sekali kendala terutama di tengah pandemi, apalagi seharusnya kita bisa lebih lama untuk mendapatkan materi, dan apalagi materinya cuma online ya. Meskipun itu juga sangat powerful, tapi semoga kedepannya pandemi bisa kita lewati bareng-bareng.
Pastinya NextDev pembinaannya lebih lama lagi. Mentor-mentornya memang dicarikan yang betul-betul dari dunia startup sehingga lebih nyambung dengan kita para founder dan tim manajemennya. Semoga NextDev ke depan makin baik, makin hebat, dan mudah-mudahan kita semua startup Indonesia bisa menjadi unicorn yang akan berguna dan bermanfaat bagi Indonesia dan seluruh dunia. Sukses buat NextDev Indonesia.
Agar Travel Buddy itu makin berkembang untuk kedepannya setelah mengikuti NextDev. Dan untuk NextDev juga, semoga NextDev itu terus untuk membantu para startup untuk mengembangkan sayapnya gitu ya, untuk mengembangkan startupnya setelah mengikuti NextDev. Itu sih harapan aku, dan semoga NextDev juga maju terus, juga bisa lebih merangkul lebih banyak startup lagi, materinya juga makin bervariasi, programnya juga makin bagus.
Nampaknya meninggalkan kesan yang sangat baik untuk para startups, dan dari wajah-wajah tadi ya, di antaranya akan menjadi NextDev Evangelist.
Wow,
tapi
betul
tidak
banget.
menutup kemungkinan semuanya akan menjadi Indonesia's future unicorn or even dekakorn. Amin nggak tuh?
Amin, 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 amin. Dan Randy, tadi kalau kita sudah saksikan barusan yaitu testimoni daripada startup, dan sekarang ini biar lebih seru ya, kita juga pengen tahu nih gimana sih kira-kira pendapat dari para mentor terhadap teman-teman kita ini nih selama proses 3 bulan. Langsung aja kita simak video berikut ini.
Terkesan dengan kualitas dari teman-teman startup, teman-teman founder yang ikut dalam program ini. Kalian keren-keren. Saya banyak belajar dari teman-teman semua, dari cerita perjalanan, insight-insight yang didapatkan selama kita interaksi, dan juga wawasan-wawasan yang saya juga bisa dapatkan.
The past 3 months have been transformational for me. I would love to give a huge shout out for my 5 mentees, ada Ibunda, Kedata, Neuro Farm, Jagel ID, dan Blood ID. Thank you so much for making me part of your amazing journey. Selama 3 bulan ke belakang, melalui sesi-sesi mentoring yang kita lakukan bersama, not only that we were exchanging ideas, sharing thoughts, but at the same time, I was also inspired and I was educated on the kind of impact that you're creating, not just for your customers, but also for the communities and many Indonesians.
Selama beberapa bulan saya bareng sama mereka, ngelihat progresnya juga sangat baik gitu ya, teman-teman di NextDev Academy tahun ini. Walaupun kondisi bisnis juga overall banyak yang jadi lebih lesu, tapi teman-teman dari NextDev Academy ini sangat semangat mengejar target yang memang sudah di-commit di depan. Matriksnya juga terpampar dengan baik dan jelas.
Dengan adanya NextDev Academy, I think it gives the kesempatan yang langka buat teman-teman yang sudah terpilih untuk bisa ngobrol, terhubung, dan juga building relationship.
Terus pelihara ketangguhan dan keteguhan ini, jangan mudah menyerah. Teman-teman terus bereksperimen sampai ketemu sesuatu yang bekerja, yang akhirnya mampu untuk bisa memvalidasi bisnis kita dan bahkan bisa menumbuhkan bisnis kita ke level yang lebih tinggi lagi. Semoga bisnis kita mampu menjelma menjadi bisnis yang sustainable dan juga punya impact besar buat Indonesia.
Saya berharap perjuangan kalian akan terus berjalan. The NextDev Academy is just a beginning. And I think after the NextDev Academy, there are more challenges to overcome, but also that means that there will be more impacts to create. I wish everyone the best of luck.
Di sini harapan saya buat teman-teman, jangan patah semangat. Ingat, yang kalian lakukan melalui NextDev ini bukan sebatas bikin bisnis aja, bukan sebatas cari cuan aja, tapi kita juga ngasih positif social impact ke masyarakat gitu.
Semoga ya ini inisiatif yang terus diselenggarakan, terus diadakan, karena ya trust me, mungkin ini hasilnya nggak singkat ya, nggak instan juga, karena namanya building a company 9 dari 10 gagal. Saya yakin buat semua yang terlibat, tidak hanya peserta ya, tidak hanya perusahaan yang terpilih, tapi juga para mentornya, kita belajar banyak banget.
biasa sekali Randy ya. Hal ini membuktikan memang keduanya juga sama-sama dapat hal positif ya, baik dari mentor dan juga startup.
Semuanya merasakan dampak yang baik dan semoga bisa kasih dampak yang baik juga ke sosialnya.
Betul
ya.
sekali.
Dan seperti tadi kita telah janjikan juga di awal.
Kamu suka berjanji ya, tapi
saya
untung ditepati, betul.
Kita akan sesaat lagi mengetahui siapa 2 finalis startup yang akan dinobatkan sebagai the NextDev Evangelist dan mendapatkan total hadiah sebesar
total 100 juta rupiah. Wow, 100 juta rupiah ya
Angka
buat
tidak kecil tentunya.
Betul
dan juga bisa
sekali.
membantu mereka. Tapi bukan Yeni dan Randy yang akan mengumumkannya. Kita akan mengundang pertama-tama Teh Dian Ono atau Teh Dian yang merupakan Head Mentor The Next Step Academy yang akan memaparkan recap dari The Next Step Academy seperti apa kemarin ini dan kriteria penilaian juga seperti apa. Juga akan dilanjuti oleh Andri Santoso atau Mas Andri, General Manager CSR Telkomsel yang juga akan mengumumkan The Next Step Evangelist.
Betul, langsung aja kalau gitu bakal kita undang ya. Ini dia Teh Dian Ono. Oke, semangat pagi.
Pagi.
Wow, luar biasa berseri banget nih Teteh hari ini ya.
Deg-degan nggak Teh?
Harus dong. Apa kabar Randy dan Yeni?
Alhamdulillah baik.
Puji Tuhan kita sehat sekali Teteh. Oke.
Alhamdulillah ya. Senang akhirnya bisa bergabung nih di acara The Next Dev Academy Inaugurations ya.
Ya betul. Kita akan langsung silahkan Teh Dian ya yang akan bercerita mengenai Next Step Academy. Dilanjutkan nanti ada Mas Andri juga Teh ya.
Siap.
Oke, baik langsung saja kalau gitu silahkan Teh Dian.
Oke, thank you Yani, Randy. Halo semuanya, selamat siang tapi tetap semangat pagi.
Pagi.
Kita nggak langsung nih di mana-mana kalau pengumuman finals atau evangelist nih harus ada jedanya dulu ya. Nanti Mas Andri akan bergabung juga. Kita harus jeda dulu nih biar deg-degan nih, pesertanya biar tambah deg-degan. Tapi sebetulnya selain deg-degan, saya mau share juga recap apa sih sebetulnya yang dilalui oleh kawan-kawan ini di NextDev Academy. Karena bukan hanya buat teman-teman yang sudah mengikuti The NextDev Academy 2020, tapi di sini juga ada yang stay tune dari YouTube. Mungkin saja nanti akan menjadi peserta The NextDev Academy tahun 2021. Jadi supaya teman-teman tahu apa aja, saya akan recap singkat, summary aja. Apa sih sebenarnya yang dilakukan sama teman-teman ini gitu. Tadi testimoninya kita sudah dengar, tapi sebetulnya apa sih mereka ikutin. Kita bisa lanjut ke next-nya. Next slide-nya kita akan bilang bahwa NextDev Academy ini program recap-nya sebetulnya ini flow-nya. Buat teman-teman yang belum tahu, kita tuh ada 3 comprehensive program, yaitu bootcamp, mentoring, dan webinars. Kemudian selama 2020 ini kita ada 24 facilitator speakers, 4 core mentors, dan 26 knowledge session. So in 3 months itu cukup padat ya, cukup padat dan efektif menurut kami gitu. Tadi banyak teman-teman juga di startup yang bilang bahwa ini waktunya pengen lebih panjang, yes, tapi menurut kita 3-4 bulan saat ini karena kemarin ada pandemi ini cukup bagus sekali. Dan saya juga appreciate sama semua teman-teman yang ikutan di NextDev Academy kali ini, tetap semangat dan komitmennya tinggi juga untuk mengikuti The NextDev Academy. Oke, nextnya saya akan cerita soal apa sih yang namanya online bootcamp. Nah, jadi di The NextDev Academy kita punya 3 pilar. So we believe in the founders, we believe in the startups, we also believe in the collaborative spirits. Jadi semua teman-teman ini kan finalis ya, dulunya kompetisi untuk jadi the best of the best di talent scouting. Setelah kompetisi selesai, there's no more competitive, but now come times to be collaborative. Nah, jadi biasanya ketika waktu NextDev Academy-nya offline, itu semua peserta dikumpulkan bersama di satu tempat nih, tapi karena kemarin kita pandemi kita jadi online. Ketika offline itu dikumpulkan bersama, kenapa? Supaya kita bisa kenal satu sama lain, bisa share ideas, share insights, terus kolaboratif satu sama lain. Tapi kalau kemarin ketika biasa 1 minggu, kemarin kita manfaatkan hanya 3 hari, tapi tetap 6 sessions with 6 speakers, dan ada beberapa aktivitas juga yang harapannya bisa menjadi kolaborasi lagi ke depannya. Itu. Jadi untuk yang ke depan mudah-mudahan nanti bisa offline ya. Tadi banyak beberapa harapan teman-teman juga. Kalau memang sudah pandemi sudah berlalu, kita bisa offline. Hopefully we can meet together and then create a good collaborative impact untuk semuanya. So after bootcamp, nextnya ada webinar series. Jadi ada 10 hari di sini, 20 topik, ada 18 speakers. Apakah 10 harinya terus? Ya enggak. Jadi jangan mikir, waduh kalau ikutan NextDev Academy kita udah 3 hari atau 6 hari bootcamp, terus 10 hari webinar terus-terusan. Of course not. Seminggu sekali kita selalu ada webinar. Setiap minggu kita ada webinar. Kita ada webinar dengan berbagai topik yang disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan dan stage dari teman-teman startups gitu. Harapannya itu bisa membantu yang tadi dibilang ilmunya daging gitu. So 10 harinya bukan 10 hari terus-terusan, tapi setiap minggu kita ada hari-hari yang didedikasikan untuk webinar. Jadi jangan khawatir, kita juga kan we are working on our startups. Kalau webinar terus, kapan kerjanya ya kan? So the past few months, 3-4 bulan, kita coba manage gimana caranya supaya waktu mentoring dan webinar itu justru malah bisa membantu mengembangkan startups gitu ya. Oke, next dan satu lagi yang tadi sudah disebutkan banyak lagi, ini adalah foto-fotonya. Nextnya adalah mentoringnya. Mentoringnya itu kita kayak menjodohkan. Jadi NextDev punya banyak pool of mentors. Dan semua mentorsnya semuanya sama, yaitu orang-orang yang sudah berpengalaman di bidangnya dan punya proven track record in working and building the startups. So kalian bisa relate gitu loh. They know your struggles, they know how it feels untuk managing antara kesulitan-kesulitan dan challenges yang ada. And mereka sudah pada tahap di mana mereka sudah punya pengalaman menghadapi itu. So hopefully can share with you. Nah, pool of mentors yang NextDev ini banyak, setiap tahun mungkin bisa berbeda-beda, yang mana kita sesuaikan dengan kebutuhan teman-teman startup yang nanti masuk ke NextDev Academy. Tahun ini ada Mas Andreas Senjaya, CEO dari iGrow, kemudian ada Baida Udara, CEO dari Pinhome, Mas Gilang Gibrantama, CEO Sekolahmu, dan Mas Fikra Iza, CTO dari Kita Bisa. Which I appreciate banget gitu, terima kasih kepada para mentor ini, karena di tengah waktunya yang sibuk, Fikra juga lagi ada di New Zealand, mereka tetap mendedikasikan waktunya untuk jadi mentor, untuk bertemu dan saling sama-sama belajar ya, sama-sama belajar dengan mentisnya. Dan itu mereka sudah lakukan bukan cuma sekali, tapi beberapa tahun ini di NextDev Academy, because mereka semua punya visi-visi yang sama kita, using technology for social impact. So I truly appreciate these mentors. Terima kasih buat Mas Andreas, Mbak Dayudara, Mas Gilang, dan Mas Fikra. Oke, next lagi, tanpa berlama-lama, sebenarnya yang di ujungnya itu adalah apa sih? Adalah NextDev Evangelist. Kita nyebutnya NextDev Evangelist karena bukan juara. Ini udah bukan kompetisi lagi, juara sudah selesai ketika talent scouting kemarin. Sekarang adalah evangelist, yang adalah kita mencari tokoh-tokoh startups yang inspiratif, yang progresnya juga tinggi, boleh di next. Ada beberapa kriteria yang kita lihat, yaitu ada 1 business growth, dan 2 impact achievement, founders engagement, dan tentu saja assessment dari mentor. Business growth sudah jelas ya, bahwa semua startup, semua bisnis, UKM, startup, apapun itu akan harus melihat business growth. Tapi yang membedakan NextDev dengan yang lain adalah we believe that we have to create social impact, a good social impact for society or environment. So, yang membuat kita, kenapa kita mengukur impact-nya? Because we believe kalau misalnya sudah diukur, itu bisa ditingkatkan. So, ini harus dengan intention yang tinggi, that we have the intention to create impact to not just to our customers, but also to society. Jadi 2 itu kita selalu track, teman-teman juga tahu, selalu ditanya sama mentornya, sama IDB-nya, sama development body-nya, apa aja sih business metrics-nya, but also apa aja sih impact metrics-nya. Ini untuk memastikan bahwa, seperti yang tadi Rowan bilang, how to create balance between profit and purpose, how to scale up and leverage your impact and your business model. Itu yang tentu saja sudah sangat obvious dan selalu konsisten dilakukan oleh NextDev. Kemudian founders engagement, karena kita juga pengen, seperti saya bilang tadi, kita believe in the founders. Bisnis model bisa berubah, produk bisa berubah. Ada beberapa teman-teman yang tadi cerita juga pivot selama pandemi karena terkena dampak pandemi. Bisnis model bisa berubah, but the founders, we believe in the founders. Jadi founders engagement, founders commitment itu sangat penting. Ada beberapa teman-teman yang private, tapi saya sangat appreciate banget gitu di tengah keadaan pandemi yang memberikan dampak banyak negatif lah kepada kita semua gitu ya. Tapi teman-teman ini tetap resilient, tetap tangguh, tahan banting, dan inovatif gitu, cari cara gimana caranya to be able to survive and sustain the business. So that's why it's about the founders. Yang terakhir, of course, mentor assessment. Nah, ini next lagi, yang ini adalah our past the NextDev evangelist. Tahun 2017 kita NextDev itu sudah dari 2015 tadi ini kemarin dibilang ya, sudah 6 tahun. Tetapi NextDev Academy sendiri baru dimulai di 2017 dengan peserta dari 2015 tentu saja. Jadi 2017 evangelistnya adalah Habibie Garden, itu IoT untuk pertanian. Kemudian ada Cakap, mungkin udah pernah dengar juga di Michael Komsel ada, itu untuk education dan platform. Kemudian tahun 2018 ada Growpal, itu juga di crowdfunding untuk peer-to-peer untuk investment ke agriculture. Ada Botika, yaitu chatbot, sekarang banyak juga digunakan oleh platform kesehatan. Ada Lindungi Hutan, yang environment. So the impact, we're not talking about just society atau health education, but also about environment. Yang tahun terbaru 2019 itu ada Check-Lab dan Mo, yang dua-duanya bergerak di bidang kesehatan, which is kebetulan sekali pada tahun itu, dan terus kemudian tahun depannya ada pandemi gitu ya. So health is one of the bigger focus juga di NextDev Academy. Nah, apa aja sih yang didapatkan sama NextDev Evangelist gitu? Kan dibilangnya bukan pemenang nih, tapi sebetulnya karena buat kita semua yang masuk sini udah pemenang, udah jadi finalis gitu. Tapi tetap saja apa sih yang didapatkan, apa sih special benefit yang bisa didapatkan oleh NextDev Evangelist? Ada beberapa banyak opportunities yang disupport oleh NextDev, yaitu ada satu international exposure. Biasanya kita akan bantu kirim teman-teman untuk international exposure, bukan cuma ke luar negerinya atau internasionalnya, but itu is a chance to validate your business ke platform, ke market yang lebih global. Ada Habibie Garden dan Cakap yang kita kirim ke Singtel Future Makers di Sydney, Australia, dan menang melawan startup-startup lain di ASEAN. So it's a proof that startup Indonesia dan startup NextDev itu juga bisa berjaya di tataran regional. Kemudian ada Global Network, Check-Lab tahun selanjutnya kita kirim ke Unleash Shenzhen China. Itu adalah global network di mana semua orang berdiskusi, bikin ide dan hackathon to solve world's problems yang berhubungan dengan SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Kemudian jangan lupa dengan punya menjadi bagian dari NextDev, punya kesempatan banyak untuk kolaborasi dengan Telkomsel tentunya, seperti yang Cakap lakukan berkolaborasi dengan My Telkomsel. Ada juga showcase dan exhibition, ada Botika ini di sini dapat exposure untuk showcase di Microsoft DevCon yang bekerjasama dengan NextDev. Apakah, nah itu semua kesempatannya. Apakah kesempatan ini hanya diberikan ke NextDev Evangelist? Tentu tidak. Seperti kita bilang tadi, semua yang masuk ke NextDev Academy adalah juara. Semua yang masuk ke NextDev Academy kita anggap menjadi bagian dari keluarga besar dan NextDev. Jadi ada beberapa kesempatan yang lain juga. Jadi jangan patah semangat. Yang kali ini tidak terpilih sebagai NextDev Evangelist, belum tentu juga kita nggak support. Tentu saja di NextDev dan Telkomsel akan selalu support. Misalnya ada Fishgo dan Divaling yang bukan NextDev Evangelist, tapi kita melihat mereka punya impact yang baik, progres yang baik, kemudian dikirimlah ke Singtel Future Makers tahun 2019. Kemudian juga ada beberapa kolaborasi yang dilakukan, seperti misalnya Eragano dengan program-program CSR Telkomsel untuk petani di desa-desa. Kemudian ketika tahun kemarin, ketika pandemi menyerang, ada inisiatif NextDev Gotong Royong yang dilakukan bersama Telkomsel dengan kostum dan jahitin untuk memberikan APD kepada para nakes. Jadi, sure NextDev Evangelist is, for me is anggaplah sebagai suatu apresiasi kepada teman-teman yang memiliki progress growth yang baik, impact yang baik, dan juga komitmen pada program NextDev yang baik. But all in all, everyone is the one part of the bigger NextDev family. Jadi kita akan selalu support dan kita selalu junjung collaborative spirits. Nah, in the end of the day, pasti penasaran sekarang ya, udah cukup. Ini dari 16 nih sekarang, dari finalis NextDev itu biasanya setiap tahun ada 20-25, tapi selalu kita saring dan assess kembali. Dan ini adalah 16 The Next Dev Academy 2020 Startups yang tadi video-videonya sudah dilihat. Dan salah dua, atau salah tiga, saya juga belum tahu. Ini yang akan jadi The Next Dev Evangelist. Nah, penasaran kan? Are you ready to be the next Dev Evangelist? Nah, tanpa berlama-lama nih, kalau untuk ini saya akan meminta Mas Andri, GM-CSR-nya Telkomsel untuk bergabung dengan saya, atau yang biasa dipanggil sama kita adalah Papi Andri. Ini papinya anak-anak NextDev. Ya kan, Mas Andri atau Papi Andri bergabung nih. Ini bapaknya NextDev, ini bapaknya NextDev. Kalau Mas Hadi tadi the leader of NextDev, ini bapaknya, ini Papi Andri. Halo, Mas Andri, Papi apa?
Mbak Dian, rekan-rekan semua, selamat sore.
Pagi Pak, semangat
Oke. Oh, selamat sore, semangat pagi. Semangat pagi.
Pagi. Masih semangat ya? Saya yakin teman-teman juga masih semangat nih menanti antara hanya kita yang menjadi batas antara pengumuman evangelis nih, Mas Andi.
Iya, betul.
Selama ini gimana Mas dari Papi sendiri? Gimana nih kesannya? Tadi kita udah dengar kesan-kesan dari peserta, dari mentor. Nah, kalau dari Papinya NextDev nih, gimana nih selama 3-4 bulan ini Papi? The NextDev Academy ini.
Kesannya, oke. Terima kasih Mbak Dian waktunya dan teman sekalian. Senang bertemu dengan teman sekalian, meskipun kita dalam konteksnya ada virtual. Alhamdulillah kita sudah melalui beberapa proses NextDev ya. Jadi kalau tanya kesannya seperti apa, meskipun kondisi pandemik, kita menjalaninya alhamdulillah cukup lancar. Jadi kami bersyukur masih mendapat kesempatan ya untuk bertemu belajar bersama ya dengan teman-teman dari para startup digital ini. Dan yang pasti adalah saya melihatnya masih semangat konsisten gitu ya, antusias dari teman-teman untuk ikut terus dalam proses yang kita lakukan di NextDev. Memang banyak, boleh dibilang ini mungkin hampir semuanya terjadi ya, bahwa kondisi pandemik membuat banyak hal yang menjadikan shifting gitu ya. Jadi kalau kita bicara beberapa tahun ke belakang, NextDev selalu kita bikinnya offline gitu ya. Sekarang larinya ke online gitu ya. Dan perlu memang ngerasa gimana ya, ada mungkin yang merasa kalau rasanya enakan di offline ya gitu ya, lebih banyak waktu, lebih banyak temu muka segala macam. Dan sekarang kita dibatasin sama yang kita hanya bisa melihat laptop gitu ya, dengan sesama mentor ataupun siapapun teman-teman di luar sana, ya mau nggak mau gitu. Tapi kita percaya bahwa yang kita lakukan kualitasnya masih sama gitu ya, Mbak Dian. Jadi masih on the track. Kita masih memberikan mentor-mentor yang sangat baik gitu ya, kualitasnya. Dan teman-teman juga punya banyak yang bisa dilakukan gitu ya, belajar satu sama lain meskipun dalam konteks yang relatif berbeda gitu.
Ya betul. Saya juga sangat apresiasi banget nih sama teman-teman dan mentor yang stay tune terus di depan laptop ya, Papi ya, stay tune selama 4 bulan mengembangkan startup-nya gitu ya. Tapi betul sekali sih, saya melihatnya 3 bulan, 4 bulan ini pendek memang. Tapi sebenarnya di dunia startup dan digital kan udah kayak 1 tahun cahaya ya, banyak sekali yang bisa berubah ya dalam.
Betul, setuju. Seperti kayak kami aja di CSR Telkomsel ya, program kami kan banyak juga. Yang sekarang dipegang Mas Hadi dengan Mas kita kan NextDev. Tapi program lain banyak, kebayang itu setiap hari NextDev kita webinar. Jam berikutnya dengan program lain, seterusnya begitu aja. Tapi mau nggak mau, karena komitmen kami Telkomsel juga harus kita deliver dalam konteksnya sekarang adalah online gitu ya. Ya harus kita lakukan itu terus.
Ya, jadi thank you banget nih Papi karena sempat tertunda, tapi saya juga sangat salut dengan komitmen Telkomsel gitu, tetap mengadakan NextDev, scouting dengan berbagai tantangan. Kalau dari satu sisi mungkin ada sisi baiknya juga bahwa dengan online ini, dengan seperti ini, kita bisa, Mas Fikra yang lagi stuck di New Zealand nggak bisa pulang, dia tetap bisa jadi mentor gitu ya Pak.
Iya betul.
Bisa dapat insight dari Mas Fikra. Rowan juga tadi gitu ya. Dari
Ya.
sekarang udah biasa ya.
Setuju, benar. Ya, saya juga kan, kami juga kayak Mas Hadi, posisinya mungkin sekarang Mas Hadi di Medan, saya ya sekarang hari ini mungkin lagi di Jakarta, tapi biasanya di Bandung gitu kan. Tapi tetap aja terhubung gitu ya semuanya.
So it's a proof that technology is enabler ya. Teknologi ini menghubungkan kita semua. Dan ini justru tetap bisa membuat kita kolaboratif lagi ke depannya. Jadi Telkomsel dan NextDev nggak putus nih kolaborasi dan silaturahminya sama teman-teman.
Setuju Mbak Dian, setuju.
Ya. Dan tahun ini harusnya setelah semakin vaksin dan segala macam ini keadaan lebih baik, harapannya kita
Amin.
on fire lagi ya, tapi ya.
Iya betul. Insya Allah kita on fire lagi lah. Mudah-mudahan cepat berlalu.
Mudah-mudahan, amin. Nah, ini kayaknya udah peserta udah deg-degan nih, udah pagi terus, sudah mau jam segini. Kita langsung mau pengumuman nih. Papi ada kisi-kisinya, ada favorit nggak nih dari 16?
Kisi-kisi favorit,
susah ya, pilihan sulit
ya. Karena kan menurut saya semuanya, ya tadi Mbak Dian sampaikan kan ada 4 parameter penilaian yang ditentukan ya. Kalau bicara semua peserta punya kesempatan yang sama gitu kan ya. Enggak itu tidak diragukan ya. Kalau kita lihat dari perputaran dari awal proses segala macam semuanya qualified lah gitu loh. Pesertanya bagus-bagus gitu ya. Tinggal kan bagaimana memanfaatkan momentum tadi dengan ketemu mentor, ya nanti tinggal dari peserta ini yang kita coba cari berdasarkan dari 4 kriteria yang tadi kita sudah tetapkan.
Ya, dan yang penting yang tidak terpilih sebagai evangelis pun tetap selalu punya menjadi bagian dari keluarga besar The NextDev ya Pak.
Iya, setuju Mbak.
Bisa berkolaborasi ya.
Betul, karena banyak hal yang kita bisa lakukan kok. Karena banyak hal yang memang nanti ke depannya program lain di Telkomsel CSR yang berkaitan dengan apapun itu ya, yang kita bisa coba chip in dengan teman-teman dari serta dari NextDev.
Yep. Oke, itu kemarin juga kita, jadi teman-teman tahu ya dari penilaian tadi 4 kriteria, tapi dari Telkomsel, dari juri, dari mentor itu kita berdebat, deliberations, udah kayak juri The Voice, masing-masing kan mempertahankan jagoannya gitu. Dan ada juga beberapa mentor yang aduh saya nggak bisa milih nih dari 5, dari 4, dari 3 menti saya siapa yang mau dikan karena saking bagus. Tapi at the end of the day we have decided untuk memilih the NextDev Evangelist yang kartunya atau jawabannya, kunci jawabannya ada di Mas Andri, ada di Papi Andri. Silahkan saya persilakan untuk Papi Andri untuk mengumumkan siapakah the NextDev Evangelist 2020. Silakan Papi.
Oke, saya ngumumin ya. Jadi buat teman-teman sekalian, atas nama Telkomsel saya ucapkan terima kasih atas kontribusi rekan sekalian. Semua peserta adalah bagus gitu ya, semua peserta ada baik, semua peserta punya diferensiasi dari masing-masing bisnis modelnya gitu ya. Dan ini adalah hanya rangkaian kegiatan saja, bukan berarti teman-teman yang tidak terpilih di 2 evangelis di sore hari ini bukan yang merasa tidak baik gitu ya. Kembali lagi kami punya kriteria yang harus kita sampaikan. Langsung aja saya umumkan. Oke. Selamat buat Education System dan Jiggle ID yang sore hari ini kita sama-sama pastikan bahwa Anda adalah evangelis untuk NextDev di 2020.
Ya.
Halo Jiggle ID.
Baik. Kita langsung minta tolong ke
kemarin juga dikasih bantuan juga mentoring sama Tedian, sedikit kita ngobrol-ngobrol, benar-benar interesting, benar-benar dibantu refresh lagi. Saya yang mulai dari zero kita jadi belajar banyak banget di NextDev ini, dan kita bisa tahu, bisa keep growing. Dan juga terima kasih juga buat fasilitatornya yang walaupun kita sering ganti-ganti waktu, susah buang-buang waktu juga buat tanya. Dan saya percaya bahwa NextDev ini juga salah satu step buat kita dan Jagal supaya bisa memberikan impact yang jauh lebih besar ke arah sosial, baik untuk Indonesia, untuk kedepannya supaya kita bisa maju bersama. Jaya terus Indonesia. Terima kasih.
Luar biasa, sekali lagi selamat ya. Waduh, ini ekspresi bahagia memang tidak bisa tertutupi ya dari wajahnya yang semriwing sekali, luar
Mumpung
biasa.
lagi sumringah semua, kita abadikan momen bahagia ini bersama-sama, boleh ya? Kita undang para evangelist dan juga ada Teh Dian, Mas Andri, dan juga kembali kami undang Pak Hadi Sucipto.
Yes, Mas Hadi Sucipto mungkin boleh ditampilkan di layar juga. Oke, sudah
Masih
ya.
seperti tadi ya nih ya, cara fotonya ya.
Kali ini tapi gayanya gaya seorang pemenang dong.
Weh, boleh.
Kita tantang nih ya. Oke, dalam hitungan saya,
Yes.
3, 2, 1, NextDev
Academy. Boleh.
Oke, sekarang kita akan ganti clue-nya ya.
Oke, jadi
NextDev
Evangelist.
Evangelist. Oke,
Boleh ya.
kita coba dulu ya. 1, 2, 3.
NextDev Evangelist. Yes, once again congratulations, selamat tahniah pada para teman-teman evangelist dan juga para finalis lainnya. Tadi sudah disebutkan semuanya pemenang.
Betul
Basically.
sekali, jangan berkecil hati, justru jadikan ini sebagai awal permulaan dari teman-teman semuanya ya. Karena kita percaya nanti ini perjalanannya sungguh panjang buat
Masih
teman-teman
panjang
semua.
dan insya Allah the next unicorn, dekakorn dunia. Amin,
Amin,
ya.
amin.
Ya, terima kasih Teh Dian dan juga Mas Andri, Mas Hadi dan juga para evangelist. Tapi kita berkenan meminta Mas Andri untuk tetap bersama kami.
Yes.
Karena kita sudah sampai ke penghujung acara dan kita mohon kesediaannya Mas Andri untuk bisa memberikan closing remarks.
Betul sekali, karena ini sebagai sekaligus menutup rangkaian acara kita pada hari ini dan juga program dari The NextDev Academy 2020. Langsung aja silakan Mas Andri.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua dan semangat pagi.
Pagi.
Pertama-tama saya ucapkan terima kasih dalam usaha kami mengembangkan ekosistem digital. Sekali lagi terima kasih atas segala dukungannya. Sampai bertemu di program NextDev berikutnya di tahun 2021. Tetap semangat. Mari bersama-sama kita berkontribusi untuk ekosistem digital Indonesia. Selamat belajar dan berkarya. Sehat selalu buat teman sekalian. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan semangat pagi.
Pagi. Terima kasih Mas Andri Santoso, General Manager dari CSR Telkomsel atas closing remarks-nya. Tepuk tangan dulu sekali lagi, sudah sampai penghujung acara ternyata ya.
Betul sekali. Sekali lagi terima kasih banyak Mas Andri. Baik, dan seperti di awal tadi Randy kita sudah menjanjikan karena kita itu bukan pemberi harapan palsu ya. Jadi kita bakal melunaskan utang-utang kita. Waduh, janji yang sudah kami berikan di awal tadi terkait dengan penanya terbaik alias 3 pertanyaan terbaik ya.
Iya, dan kita sudah punya nama-namanya yang akan kita tampilkan. Berikut ini pemenangnya.
Kita lihat 3, 2, dan 1. Oke, congratulations. Yang pertama Gamas Syahid.
Kemudian Arif Fajar via Zoom tadi partisipasinya dan juga Rahel
Lasni. Oke, nah ini
Dan
cara ngeklaimnya gimana Randy?
jika kalian ingin klaim voucher link ajanya, langsung capture layar ini sekarang juga buruan. Dan kemudian kirim nama Anda dan nomor link aja Anda ke DM atau direct message Instagramnya @thenextdev.
Yes, betul sekali, dan pastikan kalian semuanya ini sudah follow Instagramnya NextDev ya.
Follow terlebih dahulu.
Betul, karena kalau nggak follow alias nggak temenan, kalau nggak temenan nggak ada hadiahnya sayang ya.
Ya, kalau nggak kenal nggak sayang.
Oke, dan hadiahnya total Rp300.000
Rp300.000
untuk 3 orang pemenang.
Dalam rupa voucher link aja. Dan juga nanti kita masih akan bagikan dan umumkan juga door prize untuk teman-teman yang sudah atau akan mengunggah keseruannya dalam acara NextDev Academy Inauguration Day hari ini. Dan jangan lupa untuk partisipasi setelah diunggah, di-mention dan di-tag @thenextdev Instagram kami.
Betul
Ya.
sekali. Jadi untuk teman-teman yang belum upload ke sosial medianya langsung aja sekarang juga upload ya. Masih punya waktu yang cukup panjang ya. Randy
Masih ada
mungkin
waktu.
pengen capture kita dulu. Aduh salah fokus deh sama Mbak dan Mas MC-nya gitu ya.
Boleh, bebas.
Pokoknya bebas, kreasikan sebagus mungkin, sekeren mungkin, semenarik mungkin pokoknya ya.
Bikin
Dan
berkesan
nanti,
pokoknya.
betul, dan nanti hadiahnya juga sama Randy ya, yaitu voucher link aja sebesar Rp300.000 untuk 3 orang pemenang.
Akan diumumkan juga di Instagram itu juga.
Betul sekali. Dan Randy, oh my God, kita udah sampai di penghujung acara
Udah
ya.
sampai nggak berasa ya.
Betul sekali. Dan kalau gitu, teman-teman sebelum berpisah izinkan kita ya untuk kembali mengingatkan teman-teman semua untuk tetap mengindahkan protokol kesehatan dimanapun Anda berada, dan jangan lupa nih untuk follow akun Instagram kita. Kemudian di mana lagi Randy?
Ada juga di Twitter dan juga Facebook dan juga YouTube. Di
YouTube
subscribe untuk mengetahui event-event dan juga acara Next Step berikutnya.
Yes, dan kalau begitu saya Yeni Viana.
Saya Randy Wicaksana pamit undur diri. Selamat sore dan
Sampai jumpa.
Selamat pagi.
Semangat pagi. Pagi.